Hey, welcome back. These bedtime stories are here to keep you company while you unwind. You can listen closely or let them fade into the background. If this space helps you relax, subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. And before you settle in, drop a good night comment so others feel the comfort too. My husband said he wants out while I'm pregnant, and I refuse to fight for the marriage. I never thought I would be writing something like this, but I feel completely numb and also weirdly calm at the same time. I am 31 and currently 6 months pregnant with my first child. My husband Ryan is 34, and we have been married for 5 years together for almost 9. Up until a few weeks ago, I thought we were solid. Not perfect, but stable and committed in the way long marriages are supposed to be. This pregnancy was planned. We talked about it for over a year. We picked names. We argued about whether we should move closer to my parents in Ohio or stay near his job in Illinois. Ryan came to every appointment early on and held my hand during the ultrasound where we first heard the heartbeat. He cried. I remember thinking this was the happiest moment of my life. About a month ago, something shifted. He became distant in a way I could not quite put my finger on. He stayed later at work. He stopped touching my belly. He stopped talking about the future unless I brought it up. When I asked if something was wrong, he said he was stressed and tired, and I believed him because I was also tired and emotional and trying not to overthink everything. Then 2 weeks ago, he sat me down at our kitchen table on a Sunday night. I remember because I had just finished folding baby clothes my sister Emily mailed to us. He would not look at me. He stared at the table and said he did not think he wanted to be married anymore, that he felt trapped, that he loved me but was not in love with me, that he did not see this working long term. I felt like the air left my body. I asked him what he meant and if there was someone else. He said no, and I believe him, but at the same time, it almost would have been easier if there was. He said he had been feeling this way for a while and did not know how to say it. I asked him why now? Why while I am pregnant? He said he did not want to keep lying and pretending. I cried. I begged. I asked if he would go to counseling. I asked if he would at least wait until after the baby is born. I asked what exactly he wanted from me right now. That is when he said something that flipped a switch in me. He said he did not want to fight for the marriage, and that if it was going to work, I would need to convince him it was worth staying. Something about that broke whatever was left of my denial. I realized in that moment that he had already emotionally left. He was sitting across from me asking me to audition for my own marriage while carrying his child. I told him I would not do that. I said I was willing to work on things together, but I would not chase someone who was already halfway out the door. He looked shocked. He said I was giving up too easily. He said marriage takes work and compromise. I told him I agreed, but it takes 2 people who actually want to be there. I told him I would not beg someone to love me or stay with me. I said if he truly wants out, then we need to talk about next steps and about the baby. Since then, the house has been tense and quiet. He sleeps in the guest room. We speak politely about logistics like groceries and appointments. He has not apologized. He has not brought up counseling again. He keeps acting like I am the one who made the decision when all I did was refuse to fight alone. My mom Linda thinks I should push harder and not let my pride get in the way of my family. My dad Mark says I did the right thing and that no one should have to beg to be chosen. My best friend Jessica is furious on my behalf and keeps asking if there is another woman. Ryan's sister Megan told me privately that he has always struggled with commitment and that I deserve honesty even if it hurts. I have started quietly looking into my options. I spoke to a lawyer named Thomas for an initial consultation just to understand what separation would look like with a baby involved. I hated that I even had to do that, but I also need to protect myself and my child. I am not trying to punish Ryan or take anything from him. I just want stability and clarity. Ryan seems to expect me to suddenly change my mind and start trying to win him back. Instead, I am focusing on my health and the baby growing inside me. I go to my appointments alone now. I talk to my belly at night. I remind myself that I cannot control another adult's feelings or choices. Some days I feel strong and grounded. Other days I feel angry and heartbroken and scared of doing this alone. But one thing I am sure of is that I will not beg someone to stay married to me. I will not teach my child that love means chasing someone who has already decided they are done. Maybe that means my marriage ends. Maybe it means Ryan realizes what he is about to lose. Either way, I refuse to fight for something by myself while pregnant and vulnerable. I just need to know if I am wrong for drawing that line. Update. My husband said he wants out while I'm pregnant, and I refuse to fight for the marriage. A lot has happened since I first wrote, and I needed time to process before coming back. The short version is that Ryan did not suddenly come around, and I did not suddenly fall apart either. Things just kept moving in a direction I did not choose, but also did not resist. A few days after that conversation, he asked if we could talk again. I agreed, and we sat in the living room this time. He said he felt like I had shut down, and that my refusal to fight made him feel like I never cared as much as he did. That hurt, because it felt like a complete rewrite of reality. I reminded him that I asked for counseling and time, and that he said he did not want to fight and expected me to convince him to stay. I told him calmly that I was still open to joint counseling if the goal was to actually work on the marriage together. He said he did not want to give me false hope. That was the moment I accepted that this was not a phase. He had already decided. Everything else was just him trying to ease his guilt by shifting responsibility onto me. We started talking logistics after that, not in a dramatic way, more like two coworkers ending a project. He said he wanted to move out before the baby arrives, so things would be less confusing later. I told him that was probably for the best. He packed a bag that weekend and went to stay with his friend Kevin. Watching him leave with a duffel bag while my maternity clothes were folded on the couch is an image that will probably stay with me forever. He still comes by to pick up mail and grab more of his things. Sometimes he asks how the baby is. Sometimes he puts his hand awkwardly on my stomach, and I let him because this is still his child, and I do not want to turn this into a war. Other times I feel detached, like I am watching someone else's life play out. I followed through with the lawyer consultation. Thomas walked me through custody expectations and child support in our state and reassured me that being pregnant does not put me at a disadvantage. That meeting was terrifying and empowering at the same time. I am not filing anything yet, but I needed information so I would stop spiraling at night. My mom came to stay with me for a week and helped me reorganize the nursery. She apologized for pressuring me earlier and admitted she was projecting her own fear of divorce. That meant more to me than she probably realizes. My sister Emily offered to come for the birth if Ryan and I are not in a good place by then. I said yes. Ryan and I had one more hard conversation where I asked him directly if he wanted to try anything at all to save the marriage. He said he cares about me deeply, but feels relief thinking about not being married anymore. Hearing that was brutal, but also clarifying. I told him I would not punish him for his honesty, but I would also stop pretending there was something left to fix. We agreed to focus on co-parenting and keep communication respectful. Emotionally, I am all over the place. Some days I feel like a failure, even though I know logically that I did not cause this. Other days I feel strong and almost proud of myself for not groveling during the lowest moment of my life. I talk to my therapist twice a week now. Her name is Rachel, and she keeps reminding me that boundaries are not ultimatums, and self-respect is not stubbornness. Ryan told me last night that some people think I am cold for how I am handling this, that I seem too calm and detached for a pregnant woman whose marriage is ending. I told him that falling apart would not make this more real or more valid. I am surviving. I am protecting myself and my baby. If that looks like indifference from the outside, then so be it. I still do not know what the final outcome will be. I do not know when we will officially separate or file or how co-parenting will look long term. What I do know is that I will not beg someone to stay married to me out of obligation or guilt. I want my child to grow up seeing a mother who knows her worth even when everything around her falls apart. That line I drew is still there, and I am still standing behind it. Final update. My husband said he wants out while I'm pregnant, and I refuse to fight for the marriage. This will be the last time I write about this, because the situation has reached a place where there is nothing left to debate or wait for. The marriage is over, and I am at peace with that in a way I never thought I would be. A few weeks after my last update, Ryan asked to meet for coffee. I agreed, because at that point, we were already living mostly separate lives, and I wanted to keep things civil. He told me he had been thinking a lot, and that moving out felt more permanent than he expected. He said he missed the comfort of our routines and the idea of being a family. For a brief moment, I thought he might finally say he wanted to try counseling or reconciliation. Instead, he said he was confused and did not know what he wanted, but hoped we could keep things open. That was the moment everything became very clear to me. I told him gently but firmly that I was not an option to revisit when he felt lonely or uncertain. I reminded him that I asked for partnership when things got hard, and he declined. I said I needed consistency and stability for myself and for our child, and that emotional limbo was no longer acceptable. He looked genuinely hurt and said he felt like he was losing me completely. I told him he made that choice when he asked me to fight alone. A week later, he told me he had started seeing someone. He said it was new and casual and that he wanted to be honest. The woman's name is Lauren, and she works in a different department at his company. I did not ask many questions because I already knew everything I needed to know. There was no big explosion, no yelling, just a quiet finality. Any lingering doubt I had vanished in that moment. I filed for separation shortly after that, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Thomas helped me with the paperwork and explained each step so I would not feel overwhelmed. Ryan did not contest anything. We agreed on temporary arrangements, and he will be financially responsible in a way that supports the baby. He signed everything without argument. That hurt more than if he had fought because it confirmed how done he really was. Emotionally, something shifted after that. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. I stopped imagining alternate outcomes. I focused on preparing for my child. I finished the nursery. I took prenatal classes. I learned how to install the car seat with my dad's help. I laughed more than I expected to. Ryan came to one of the later appointments and heard the heartbeat again. He cried quietly. I did not. I felt sad for him, but also strangely distant, like we were standing on opposite sides of a glass wall. We talked afterward about co-parenting expectations and boundaries. I told him I would not discuss his personal life with me and that communication would be about the baby only unless there was a true emergency. He agreed. The birth happened earlier than expected, but everything went smoothly. My daughter was born healthy and strong, and the moment they placed her on my chest, something inside me locked into place. Her name is Claire. Ryan was there. He held her. He thanked me. I nodded. There was no bitterness in that room, but there was also no intimacy. Just two adults sharing responsibility for a tiny human who deserved better than unresolved resentment. Since then, life has settled into a new rhythm. Ryan visits regularly and is involved in Claire's care. We are polite and cooperative. We are not friends, and we are not enemies. My mom stayed with me for the first month, and my sister visits often. I am tired in the way only new parents understand, but I am not broken. I have heard through mutual friends that Ryan struggles with guilt and regrets how things ended. I do not take comfort in that. I do not wish him pain. I also do not feel responsible for easing it. I made peace with my decision a long time ago, and I would make it again without hesitation. Looking back, I realized that refusing to fight alone was not giving up. It was choosing myself and my child. It was refusing to model desperation as love. I did not lose my marriage because I would not beg. I lost it because my husband stopped choosing it long before he admitted it out loud. I am building a life that feels honest and steady. It is not the life I planned, but it is one I respect. And that matters more than holding on to something that only existed on paper. Stories number 2. Calling out my sister for using our mom as a weapon at a family dinner. I never thought I would be the person who snaps at a family gathering, because I am usually the one who keeps the peace and swallows my feelings to avoid drama, but something about this last dinner finally broke me, and now half my family thinks I crossed a line, and the other half is quietly telling me I did what they have wanted to do for years. I am 34 and the middle child with an older sister named Lauren and a younger brother named Eric. And growing up, Lauren was always the golden child who knew exactly how to say the right things in front of adults and exactly how to push buttons behind closed doors. Our mom Patricia raised us mostly on her own after our dad passed away when we were teenagers, and because of that, our mom's opinion carries a lot of weight in our family. She is kind and generous, but also very sensitive, and she worries constantly about whether she did enough for us. Lauren knows this better than anyone. For as long as I can remember, Lauren has had this habit of ending arguments with some version of mom would be disappointed, or mom wouldn't like this, or imagine how mom would feel if she heard you say that. She does it with a calm voice and a sad look, and suddenly the conversation is no longer about whatever issue we were actually talking about, but about protecting mom's feelings, and no one wants to be the bad kid who hurts mom. It works every time. I moved out of state in my 20s for work, and came back 2 years ago after getting married to my wife Danielle. Since being back, I have seen this pattern more clearly because I am not in survival mode anymore. Lauren uses mom as a shield and a sword. If anyone challenges her choices, she brings mom into it, even when mom has nothing to do with the situation. I have watched her do it to Eric about his career, to our Aunt Michelle about money, and even to Danielle about how we plan holidays. The incident that blew everything up happened at a Sunday dinner at mom's house. These dinners are a big deal to her, and she cooks all day and wants everyone there. Lauren came with her husband Kevin and their 2 kids. Eric came with his girlfriend Natalie. Danielle and I brought dessert. Everything was fine at first. We were talking about work, and the kids were running around, and mom was happy. Then the conversation turned to mom's house. She has been talking about possibly selling and downsizing because the place is too big for her now. This is something she has mentioned casually, and nothing is decided. Lauren immediately started talking about how selling would be a mistake, and how mom would regret it, and how the house needs to stay in the family. Eric said gently that it is mom's decision, and that a smaller place might be easier for her. Lauren's face changed instantly. She looked at Eric and said, "I just think mom would be so disappointed if she knew you were pushing her to give up the house she worked so hard for." She said it loudly enough that the table went quiet. Mom looked confused and hurt and said, "I am not disappointed. I was just thinking out loud." Lauren shook her head and said, "Mom, you are just saying that to keep the peace." Something in me snapped. I felt my chest get hot, and before I could overthink it, I said, "Lauren, you need to stop using mom like that. You always say mom would be disappointed to shut people down, and it is manipulative. You are putting words in her mouth. You could hear a fork drop." Lauren stared at me like I had slapped her. Kevin looked at his plate. Eric went wide-eyed. Mom immediately got upset and said, "Please do not fight at dinner." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, and she said, "I cannot believe you would accuse me of manipulating our own mother in front of everyone." She said she was just trying to protect mom and that I was attacking her character. I said, "I am not attacking you, I am calling out a pattern. Mom does not need to be used as a threat to win arguments. She can speak for herself." I kept my voice calm but firm. I did not yell. I did not swear. But I did not back down either. Lauren stood up and said she was done and took the kids to the car. Kevin followed her. Mom started crying and said she just wanted a nice dinner. I felt horrible because hurting mom was never my intention. Eric tried to calm her down, and Danielle put an arm around me under the table. After they left, the rest of the dinner was awkward and quiet. Mom asked me why I would say something like that, and I told her honestly that it hurts me to see her get pulled into conflicts that are not hers. I told her I love her, and I would never want to hurt her. She said she knows Lauren can be dramatic, but that she hates conflict between her children. The next day, my phone blew up. Lauren sent me a long text saying I humiliated her and accused me of being jealous of her relationship with mom. She said I undermined her as a daughter and as a mother. She said I should apologize to her and to mom immediately. Kevin sent a shorter message saying things got out of hand and maybe I could have picked a better time. My Aunt Michelle called me and said she was proud of me because Lauren has used the mom card on her for years and she always felt crazy for being upset about it. Eric told me privately that he agrees with me but wishes I had not said it at dinner. Mom called me and said she loves me and understands what I was trying to say, but she wishes I had done it privately. Now, I am stuck. I feel like someone finally said the truth out loud, and of course it was messy because the truth usually is. I also feel awful that mom was caught in the middle and cried because of it. I do not regret what I said, but I regret where I said it. At the same time, I know if I had tried to talk to Lauren privately, she would have twisted it and brought mom into it anyway. Family gatherings are tense now. Lauren has not come to the last 2 dinners, and mom is sad about it. I have not apologized because I do not think calling out manipulation is wrong, but I am wondering if I should apologize for the setting and not the message. I am also worried that if I back down now, it will just confirm to Lauren that using mom works and that I will never say anything again. I keep replaying the moment in my head and wondering if there was another way. But I also think about how many times I stayed quiet while watching my sister control the room by invoking our mom's disappointment and how unfair that has always been to everyone else, including mom herself. I do not want to be the reason my family fractures, but I also do not want to keep enabling something that hurts all of us in the long run. Update: calling out my sister for using our mom as a weapon at a family dinner. A lot has happened since that dinner, and I honestly did not expect things to escalate the way they did, but I guess once you poke a long ignored issue, it does not just quietly go away. A few days after everything blew up, I decided to talk to my mom one-on-one. I went over to her house in the morning when I knew she would be calmer and not distracted by cooking or hosting. I told her I was sorry for upsetting her at dinner, and I meant that part completely. I also told her I needed her to understand why I spoke up. I explained how it feels when every disagreement turns into a referendum on whether we are disappointing her, even when she has not said anything like that. I told her it puts her on a pedestal she did not ask for and uses her emotions as leverage. Mom surprised me by admitting she feels pressured when Lauren does that. She said sometimes she agrees with Lauren and sometimes she does not. But once Lauren says mom would be disappointed, she feels like she cannot contradict her without looking weak or confused. Hearing that made me feel both validated and sad because it confirmed that this was not just something in my head. Mom asked me not to repeat what she said because she did not want more drama, but she thanked me for caring about her feelings instead of assuming she needed to be protected. Lauren found out I had gone over there anyway. She called me that night, and the conversation was rough from the start. She accused me of going behind her back and manipulating mom against her, which felt incredibly ironic. I told her exactly what I told mom, which is that I am not trying to turn anyone against her, and I am not trying to control anything. I told her I was willing to apologize for the timing, but not for saying what I said. She said that was not good enough. She went on a long rant about how she has always been the one to take care of mom emotionally and how she feels responsible for keeping the family together. She said if she does not step in, then things fall apart. I told her that taking responsibility does not mean speaking for someone else or using their feelings as a threat. I said mom is an adult and can handle her own emotions. Lauren said that was easy for me to say because I moved away and got to live my life while she stayed close and dealt with everything. That part stung because there is some truth there. I acknowledge that she has been physically closer and that I appreciate what she has done. I also told her that does not give her the right to control every conversation. She started crying and said she feels like I turned the family against her. I told her no one is against her, but people are tired of feeling emotionally cornered. After that call, she blocked me. A week went by with complete silence. Mom kept asking me if I had heard from Lauren, and I kept saying no. Eric told me Lauren had been calling him and venting and using the same language she always does, saying Mom is heartbroken and stressed because of me. Eric finally told her to stop putting words in Mom's mouth, and she hung up on him too. Things reached another breaking point when Mom had a minor health scare. She fainted in the grocery store and was taken to the hospital. She was fine and released the same day, but it scared everyone. Lauren showed up at the hospital furious and immediately blamed stress from the family conflict. She looked straight at me and said, "This is what happens when you attack people who are just trying to help Mom." I lost my temper a little then and said this is exactly what I was talking about. Even now you are speaking for her and blaming everyone else. Mom weakly told us to stop and said she fainted because she skipped lunch and overdid it that morning. A nurse confirmed dehydration. The room went quiet. After that moment, something shifted. Lauren did not apologize, but she stopped talking. Kevin pulled me aside and told me he thinks Lauren is scared of losing her role in the family. He said she ties a lot of her identity to being the responsible daughter, and when that is challenged, she panics. That does not excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it a bit better. Since then, we have had a few family dinners without Lauren. Mom misses her, but also admits the dinners are calmer. Eric told me he feels relieved, not walking on eggshells. Aunt Michelle has been coming around more often. Danielle told me she feels like she can finally speak without worrying she will somehow be hurting Mom by having an opinion. I did eventually send Lauren a message saying, I am sorry for calling her out in front of everyone and hurting Mom in the process. I also said I stand by the message and that I am open to talking when she is ready to have a conversation without bringing Mom into it. She has not responded yet. I do not know how this will end. Part of me hopes Lauren will eventually reflect and we can reset with healthier boundaries. Part of me knows she might never admit fault and that our relationship may always be distant. What I do know is that for the first time, I feel like I am not crazy for seeing the manipulation, and that matters more than keeping the peace at any cost. I hate that it came to this, but I also see how much lighter things feel when the truth is not constantly being buried to protect someone else's control. Stories number 3. My stepdaughter's body and clothing are already becoming a battleground, and I hate it. I married Aaron 3 years ago, and when I did, I knew I wasn't just marrying him, I was stepping into the life of his daughter too. Her name is Lily, and she was 8 when I first met her. She had these big brown eyes that always looked like she was thinking 5 thoughts at once, and she talked with her hands like she was conducting an orchestra. I loved her from the start, not in a fake way or a forced way, but in that slow, steady way where you realize one day that you'd panic if anything ever happened to this kid. Now Lily is 11, almost 12, and things are changing, not just physically, but socially, emotionally, and in ways that make every adult in her life suddenly have an opinion. The biggest one lately has been her clothes. This all really started last summer. Lily went to stay with her mom, Rachel, for 6 weeks. That's how their custody works. School year mostly with us, summer split more evenly. When she left, she was still mostly into leggings, oversized hoodies, sneakers with lights on them, and graphic tees with animals or cartoon characters. When she came back, it was like someone had swapped her out with a different kid. She had crop tops, ripped jeans that honestly looked more whole than fabric, tiny shorts, tight dresses, and shirts that showed her shoulders and stomach. She was excited about it. She dumped her suitcase on the bed and started pulling things out one by one, saying, "Mom let me pick my own style now," like it was some huge promotion. I didn't say anything in that moment. I smiled and nodded and said they were cute because I could see how proud she was. But inside, I felt this knot in my chest. Not because I think clothes are evil, but because I know how the world treats girls, especially when they start to look older before they really are. Aaron noticed too. Later that night, after Lily went to sleep, he sat on the edge of our bed and rubbed his face like he always does when he's stressed. He said, "She's too young for some of that stuff, right?" I told him I thought some of it was fine and some of it made me uncomfortable, but that we needed to be careful not to shame her. He agreed, but he was clearly worried. The next morning, Lily came down wearing a cropped tank top and shorts that barely covered her thighs. Aaron hesitated, then said, "Hey kiddo, maybe you could change into something a little more covered for school." Her face dropped instantly. She said, "Mom says it's fine. She bought this for me." Aaron said, "I know, but here we have different rules." She crossed her arms and said, "That's not fair." And just like that, it became a battle. Every morning after that was tense. Lily would come out in something that showed a lot of skin. Aaron would ask her to change. She would argue, sometimes cry, sometimes storm back to her room. I tried to stay calm, to say things like, "We just want you to be comfortable and safe," but she heard it as, "We don't like what you like." Rachel didn't help. Aaron called her to talk about it, and she basically told him he was being controlling and old-fashioned. She said Lily needed freedom to express herself, and that policing her clothes would just give her body issues. Aaron hung up angry and hurt. He said, "She makes it sound like I'm trying to control my daughter's body, when I'm just trying to protect her." That's when I realized how complicated this really was. On one side, you have a kid who wants to feel grown and cool and confident. On the other, you have parents who know how fast the world can be cruel. Things got worse when school started. Lily came home one day, unusually quiet. I asked her how her day was, and she just shrugged. Later, I found her sitting on her bed, staring at her phone. I asked if everything was okay, and she said some kids had made comments about her clothes. Not kind ones. Not cruel enough to report, but enough to make her feel weird. She said, "They said I dress like I'm trying to be older than I am." I hugged her, and I told her she didn't have to dress any way to make other people happy. But inside, I was thinking, this is exactly what we were worried about. That night, Aaron wanted to lay down stricter rules. He said no crop tops, no super short shorts, no low cut anything. I told him I thought if we went too hard, she'd just dig in more. We argued quietly in the kitchen while Lily was in her room. I said, if we make it all about control, she's going to stop talking to us. He said, if we don't set limits, we're not doing our job. We ended up with a compromise that satisfied no one. Some clothes were okay, some weren't, and Lily had to run her outfit by us in the morning. She hated that. She said it made her feel like a baby. Then came the day that really broke my heart. We were getting ready to go to a family barbecue at Aaron's sister's house. Lily came out wearing a tight dress that Rachel had bought her. It wasn't see-through or super low, but it hugged her body in a way that made her suddenly look much older. Aaron froze. He said, I don't think that's appropriate for a family thing. Lily snapped, you just don't want me to look pretty. That hit him hard. He said, that's not true. You're beautiful no matter what you wear. She started crying and said, then why do you always make me change? I stepped in and suggested leggings and a longer shirt instead. Lily threw the dress on the couch and ran to her room. We could hear her crying through the door. I went in after a few minutes. I sat on her bed and told her I knew this was frustrating. She said, Mom lets me wear whatever I want. Here, it's always a problem. It makes me feel bad about my body. That sentence scared me more than any outfit ever could. I told her no one here thought her body was bad. I told her sometimes adults argue about rules, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with her. She asked me, do you think I dress bad? I said, I think you dress like an 11-year-old trying to figure out who she is. She smiled a little at that. At the barbecue, she was quiet. I watched her sit with her cousins, laughing sometimes, but not like usual. Aaron noticed too. On the way home, He said, "I hate that this is hurting her." I said, "Me too. But I don't know how to fix it without making someone angry." After that, Lily started splitting her wardrobe mentally. Mom clothes and dad house clothes. She'd pack certain outfits for certain houses. It made me sad because it felt like she was learning to be two different people instead of one whole kid. Rachel kept pushing. She'd send Lily back in new outfits, always a little more daring than before. Sometimes she'd even send messages like, "Lily loves the new style she's finding." It felt passive-aggressive, like she was daring us to say something. Aaron wanted to confront her harder. I asked him to try one more calm conversation. He called her again, and I could hear his voice getting tight as they talked. She accused him of shaming Lily. He accused her of not caring about boundaries. They ended the call angry again. That night, Lily overheard us talking. She came into the kitchen and said, "Are you fighting because of me?" Aaron knelt down and said, "No, kiddo, we're not fighting because of you. We're fighting about how to be good parents to you," she said. "I wish you would all just stop." That's when I realized how heavy this was for her. What felt like a clothing issue to adults felt like she was the problem. So I tried something different. One weekend, I asked Lily if she wanted to go shopping with me. Just us. She looked suspicious, but agreed. At the store, I told her she could pick things she liked, but I'd like her to explain what she liked about them. She picked a cropped hoodie. I asked what she liked. She said it made her feel cool like the older girls at school. She picked a long, flowy skirt. She said it made her feel like a character in a movie. She picked jeans with rips. She said they made her feel confident. I didn't say no to everything. I just asked questions. Then I showed her some things and explained why I liked them. Not because they hit her, but because they looked comfortable, fun, or practical. At home, we showed Aaron what we bought. Some things he liked, some he hesitated about. But because Lily had explained her choices, the conversation was calmer. It wasn't about control. It was about understanding. It didn't fix everything. Some mornings are still hard. Some outfits still cause arguments. Rachel is still on the other side of the fence. But Lily talks to me more now. She'll ask, "Is this okay for school?" instead of just daring us to say no. The hardest part for me is knowing that no matter what we do, someone will think we're wrong. If we let her wear whatever, some people will say we're careless. If we set limits, some will say we're controlling. I just know I don't want Lily to grow up thinking her body is a problem or a weapon. I don't want her to think love comes with conditions about how she looks. I also don't want her to grow up too fast because the world is eager to see her as something she isn't ready to be. Every night when I tuck her in, she still wants a hug. She still tells me about her friends and her favorite shows. She's still a kid. I'm trying to remember that. Even when the clothes make everything feel bigger than it should be. I hate that her body and her clothes have become a battlefield between adults who all claim to love her. I hate that she feels it. I hate that there isn't a perfect answer. All I can do is keep choosing her over my pride, over winning arguments, over being right. I just want her to grow up knowing she was protected, not controlled, and loved, not judged. And I hope one day, when she's older and looks back, she doesn't remember the fights about clothes. I hope she remembers that she was listened to, even when we didn't always agree. Update: my stepdaughter's body and clothing are already becoming a battleground, and I hate it. It has been a few months since everything I wrote before, and I wish I could say it all magically settled down, but it didn't. It changed, though, in ways I didn't expect. After that shopping trip Lily and I took, she started trusting me more with her feelings, not just about clothes, but about school, friends, and even things she used to hide behind jokes. She told me about a girl in her class named Madison, who always comments on what everyone wears. Sometimes it is mean, sometimes it is fake nice, but it always makes people feel small. Lily said Madison once told her, "You dress like you're trying too hard," and another time said, "You dress like a baby," depending on what Lily wore that day. That messed with her head more than she admitted at first. She started changing outfits 2 or 3 times in the morning, asking, "Is this weird?" or "Does this look dumb?" Aaron noticed, and it scared him. He said, "I thought we were trying to make her not care so much." I told him caring a little is normal at her age, but caring too much is what we have to watch. Then something big happened at school. Lily got dress coded. It was for a shirt that showed her shoulders and part of her back. She wasn't wearing anything wild, just something Rachel had bought. They made her wear an oversized lost and found shirt the rest of the day. She came home furious and embarrassed. She said kids laughed, not loudly, but enough that she noticed. She said, "Everyone could tell I got in trouble just by looking at me." She went straight to her room and slammed the door. Aaron was ready to call the school, but I went to talk to Lily first. She said she hated her body, that it always got her in trouble. That broke me. I sat on the floor and told her her body didn't do anything wrong. I told her sometimes adults make rules that don't always make sense to kids, and sometimes those rules aren't fair. That night, Aaron did call the school. He stayed calm, but firm. The principal explained their dress code, and while some of it made sense, some of it sounded like it was written without thinking about how kids actually feel. Aaron told him, "My daughter came home thinking her body is the problem. That's not okay. The school didn't change their rules, but they agreed to handle it more privately in the future, without the public embarrassment. It wasn't perfect, but it was something." Rachel's reaction to the dress code situation was not calm. She sent a long message saying the school was sexist, that Aaron should have defended Lily more, and that he was partly to blame for teaching her to be ashamed. Aaron was furious. He said, "I've spent months trying to protect her feelings." They argued again over text this time, with Lily accidentally seeing some of it when Rachel showed her messages. Lily came back from Rachel's house quieter than usual. She told me her mom said, "Some people just don't like it when girls grow up." Lily asked me, "Do you not like that I'm growing up?" I told her I love watching her grow. But growing up can be confusing and scary, and adults sometimes mess up how they help with that. She nodded like she understood more than I wish she did. One weekend, Lily didn't want to go to Rachel's. She said she was tired of everyone talking about her clothes, like it was the most important thing about her. She said, "I like art, and soccer, and my friends, but all anyone cares about is what I wear." Aaron talked to Rachel, and even though she wasn't happy, they agreed Lily could skip that weekend and stay with us. That weekend felt lighter. Lily wore sweatpants most of the time, not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to be comfortable. She painted for hours at the kitchen table, listening to music and singing badly on purpose just to make us laugh. It made me realize how much pressure she had been under, not just from parents, but from school, friends, and the internet. She follows girls online who are way older than her, with perfect bodies and perfect clothes. I talked to her about that, about how people online show highlights, not real life. She listened, but I know that kind of thing sinks in slowly. Aaron and I also had to face our own stuff. One night he admitted, "Sometimes I'm scared because I remember how people looked at girls when I was a teenager. I don't want that for her." I told him I worry too, but fear can't be the only thing guiding us. We decided to change how we talk about clothes. Instead of "that's not appropriate," we try to say why something might not work for a certain place or time. Like, that might be uncomfortable for school because you'll be sitting all day, or that might be better for a weekend than a family event. It doesn't always stop arguments, but it feels less like judgment. Rachel eventually agreed to a meeting, just the 3 adults. No Lily. It was tense. She accused us of being too strict. Aaron accused her of not caring about boundaries. I tried to keep it focused on Lily, not on who was right. I said, "She feels like her clothes matter more than who she is. That's hurting her." Rachel went quiet at that. For the first time, she didn't argue right away. She said Lily had cried to her too, saying she was tired of being talked about like she was a problem. That changed the tone a little. We didn't suddenly agree on everything, but we agreed on one thing, that Lily's feelings mattered more than winning. We made a loose plan. We wouldn't trash each other's rules in front of Lily. We'd explain differences calmly. And we'd all make an effort to talk about Lily's interests more than her appearance. It hasn't been perfect. Sometimes Rachel still buys things we wouldn't choose. Sometimes Aaron still gets tense when Lily comes out in something that makes him nervous. But now, instead of it turning into a fight, it turns into a conversation more often than not. The biggest change is Lily herself. She still likes experimenting with clothes, but she also seems more sure of herself. She wore a baggy hoodie to school one day and said, "I just felt like being cozy." Another day she wore a dress and said, "I felt like being fancy." She didn't ask for approval every time. She also started talking more about other things. She joined an art club. She asked to try out for a soccer team. She talks about her friends and her crushes and her fears about middle school next year. One night, she said, "I think people are always going to have opinions about girls." I asked her what she thought about that. She said, "I think I can't make everyone happy, so I should just try to make me happy." I don't know where she got that wisdom from, but it made my chest hurt in a good way. I still hate that her body and clothes ever became a battleground. I hate that she had to grow up a little faster because adults couldn't always get it right. But I'm proud of how she's handling it. I'm proud of how hard Aaron is trying even when his fear gets loud. I'm even proud of Rachel for at least trying to meet us in the middle. We're not done. We probably never will be. Parenting isn't a problem you solve. It's something you keep working on. But now, when Lily hugs me goodnight, she feels lighter. And that tells me we're doing something right, even if we're still learning how. Update: my stepdaughter's body and clothing are already becoming a battleground, and I hate it. I didn't think I would need to write again, but life doesn't really care what you think is finished. Middle school started, and that alone changed everything. New building, new teachers, older kids everywhere, and suddenly Lily felt very small again. The night before her first day, she laid all her clothes on the floor and just stared at them. She said, "What if I look stupid?" I sat with her and told her everyone worries about that, even adults, even people who pretend they don't. She picked out jeans and a hoodie. Nothing dramatic, just safe. When she came home that day, she said, "Nobody cared what I wore." She looked confused and relieved at the same time. For a while, things were calm. Too calm, honestly. Lily stopped experimenting so much. She stuck to the same few outfits. Comfortable, quiet, invisible. Aaron noticed and said, "Is she okay?" I wasn't sure. Then one evening, Lily came home angry. Not sad, not quiet. Angry. She threw her backpack down and said, "Some boy said I dress like a grandma." She tried to laugh, but her eyes were shiny. I asked her what she wanted to do about it. She said, "I want to wear what I actually like." The next morning, she wore a bright skirt and a shirt with stars on it. It wasn't revealing. It wasn't trying to be grown. It was just her. She looked nervous walking out the door, but she held her head up. When she came home, she said, "Some people stared. Some people said they liked it. I didn't die." She smiled when she said it. Rachel noticed too. She called Aaron and said Lily had been talking about finding her own style. For once, she didn't sound sarcastic. She sounded proud. That felt like a small miracle. There was still one big problem we hadn't faced yet: social media. Lily had been asking for more freedom online. We had been careful, but middle school made everything louder. Kids talked about apps we barely knew. Aaron and I said we would think about it. One night, Lily came to me and said, "Some girls post pictures of themselves, and everyone likes them." I asked how that made her feel. She said, "Like if you don't look a certain way, you don't matter." That scared me more than any outfit ever did. We had a long talk about likes not being love, about pictures not being real life, about how bodies are not projects. She listened, but I know those messages fight against 1,000 louder ones. We compromised. She got one app. Private account. Family could follow. No strangers. She was excited, but also nervous. The first picture she posted wasn't of her body. It was of a painting she made. The caption said, "I made this." She showed me like it was a secret treasure. Some people liked it, some didn't. She checked at first, then slowly stopped checking so much. That felt like another quiet victory. Then came the moment that really closed this chapter for me. It was a school dance. Lily had never been to one before. She asked if she could wear a dress Rachel had bought her. It was simple, but pretty. Aaron hesitated, then said, "Do you feel good in it?" Lily said, "Yeah, I feel like me." He nodded. That was it. No fight, no long speech, just trust. When she came downstairs ready, she looked nervous and excited and like a kid playing dress up in the best way. Aaron told her she looked beautiful, not because of the dress, but because she was smiling. She came home that night tired and happy. She said, "Nobody cared what I wore. We just danced and ate bad pizza." She laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Later that week, she told me something that made my throat tight. She said, "I think clothes are just clothes. People make them a big deal, but they're not." I asked her what she thought was a big deal. She said, "How people treat you." I thought about all the fights, all the tears, all the fear. I thought about how close we came to teaching her that her body was a problem instead of teaching her that the world can be. Rachel and Aaron don't agree on everything. They probably never will. But they talk better now. They don't use Lily as a battlefield anymore. When they disagree, they keep it between themselves. Lily still changes. She still tries new things. Some days she wants to be invisible. Some days she wants to stand out. And now, most days, nobody makes it a war. The other night, when I tucked her in, she said, "Do you think I'm weird?" I said, "Yeah, in the best way." She laughed and hugged me. I don't hate the battleground anymore. Not because it never existed, but because we learned how to leave it. We learned that winning didn't matter. Listening did. If this is the last time I write about it, I hope this is how it ends. Not perfectly, but kindly. Stories number 4. Trying to secretly help my girlfriend with money and making everything worse. I never thought trying to do something generous could blow up my life this badly, and I need to get this off my chest because I feel sick every time I think about it. I am a 29-year-old guy living in Ohio, and I have been dating my girlfriend Emily for a little over 2 years. Emily is 27, and she is one of the hardest working people I know. She grew up with very little, and she has always been extremely sensitive about money. She insists on paying her half of everything, and she gets visibly uncomfortable if I offer to cover dinner too often. I make more than she does because I work in it, and she works as a vet tech, so I have always tried to be respectful of her pride. About 6 months ago, Emily's mom, Linda, got sick. It started with what they thought was pneumonia and turned into something much worse. Emily began driving to Indiana every weekend to help her mom and missing shifts at work. She never asked me for help, but I could see the stress eating her alive. She was constantly checking her bank app and snapping at little things. One night she finally broke down and admitted she was behind on rent and had maxed out a credit card paying for gas and medications. I offered to help and she shut down immediately. She told me she did not want to feel like a charity case and that she would figure it out. I dropped it because pushing her only made her defensive. That should have been the end of it, but I could not let it go. Watching someone you love suffer when you have the ability to help feels unbearable. Here is where I messed up. I decided to help her without telling her. I thought if I could remove the immediate pressure, she would be able to breathe, and later I could tell her when things were calmer. I know now that this was a terrible idea, but at the time, it felt logical. Emily and I have a joint Costco account, and I knew her email password because she had given it to me months ago to print concert tickets. I logged into her email, which I know was wrong, and found her landlord's contact info from old messages. I sent him an email pretending to be Emily saying I was paying next month's rent early. I used my own money and paid the full amount plus the late fee she owed. I also paid off her credit card balance because I had seen the statement sitting on her desk. I did not think about how obvious that would be. I just wanted the numbers to go away so she could sleep. For about a week, things seemed better. Emily was less tense and even joked that maybe the universe had cut her a break. Every time she said that my stomach twisted, but I convinced myself I would tell her soon. Then, everything exploded. Emily got an email receipt from her credit card company confirming a zero balance. She called me at work in a panic, asking if I had done something. I tried to dodge the question and told her we would talk when I got home. That was mistake number 2. When I walked into the apartment, she was sitting at the table with her laptop open and her phone in her hand. She asked me again, and I admitted everything. The email, the rent, the credit card, all of it. I told her I was sorry and that I just wanted to help. She went completely quiet, which scared me more than if she had yelled. Then she started crying and asking how I could violate her privacy like that. She said she felt humiliated and controlled, and like I saw her as a problem to be fixed instead of a partner. I tried to explain my intentions, but every word made it worse. She told me that her ex-boyfriend Mark used to do things like this and then throw it in her face during arguments. I had no idea. She said trust was everything to her, and I had just shattered it. Hearing my name put in the same sentence as Mark felt like getting punched. I apologized over and over and offered to transfer the money back into my account and let her handle it. She said it was not about the money anymore and that she needed space. She packed a bag and went to stay with her friend Sarah that night. The next day, I got a call from her landlord who somehow realized I was not Emily. He was angry and said impersonating a tenant was inappropriate and possibly illegal. He refunded the rent payment and said Emily would need to contact him directly. I panicked and told Emily what happened. That made things even worse because now her rent was unpaid again and she was embarrassed with her landlord. Emily texted me later saying she needed time to think and that she did not know if she could be with someone who would go behind her back like that. She also said her mom's condition had taken a turn for the worse and she did not have the emotional capacity to deal with me right now. I feel like I tried to be a hero and ended up being a villain in her story. I know I crossed serious boundaries and I hate myself for it. At the same time, I am terrified that I might lose her forever over something I did out of love. I have not heard from her in 3 days. I keep replaying everything in my head and wondering if there was any way to fix this without destroying her trust. I do not know if I should give her more space or try to apologize again or if I have already done enough damage. I never wanted to control her or make her feel small. I just wanted to help the person I love when she was drowning, and instead, I might have pushed her away for good. Update: trying to secretly help my girlfriend with money and making everything worse. It has been a few weeks since everything fell apart, and I honestly did not know if I would ever be writing this. A lot has happened, and I am still emotionally exhausted, but I need to get this out because things escalated in ways I never expected. After those first 3 days of silence, I forced myself not to text Emily again. Every instinct told me to apologize one more time or explain myself better, but I knew that would only be for my own comfort. On the 4th day, she finally reached out and simply asked if we could talk in person. No emojis, no extra words, just that sentence. My hands were shaking when I replied yes. We met at a small park, halfway between my apartment and Sarah's place. Emily looked tired in a way I had never seen before. Her eyes were red and she had lost weight. I tried to hug her and she stepped back, which hurt more than I want to admit. We sat on a bench and she immediately told me that her mom, Linda, had been moved to hospice care. Hearing that made my chest tighten, and suddenly my stupid money mistake felt even smaller compared to what she was dealing with. She told me she was angry, but also conflicted. She said part of her knew my intentions were good, but another part of her felt deeply unsafe knowing I could access her personal information and make decisions for her without consent. She said trust for her is not just about cheating or lying, but about autonomy. That word stuck with me because I realized I had taken that away from her. I told her I understood and that I was not asking her to forgive me immediately or even stay with me. I said I would respect whatever boundaries she needed. That seemed to calm her a bit. She told me she wanted to take a break, but not break up completely. She needed to focus on her mom and sort out her own feelings without worrying about my reactions. During that conversation, she also dropped another bomb. Her ex Mark had financially sabotaged her in the past by opening a credit card in her name. She only found out years later, and it wrecked her credit. When she saw the paid-off balance, she had a full panic response, because it triggered all of that. I felt physically ill hearing this, because I finally understood why my actions were so damaging. Over the next 2 weeks, we had minimal contact, mostly short texts about logistics and once about her mom. Then one afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a man named Robert who introduced himself as Linda's brother. He told me Emily was overwhelmed and that he was helping coordinate things. He asked if I had paid Emily's bills recently. I froze because I did not know how to answer. He explained that Emily had told him what happened and that he wanted to talk to me man to man. He said he understood wanting to help, but that intentions do not erase impact. He also told me Emily was struggling financially again because of reduced hours at work and travel costs. Hearing that made every fiber of my being want to step in again, but I did not. Instead, I asked what I could do that would actually help. He suggested something I had not considered at all. He said if I wanted to support her, I should ask her permission and give her control. That could mean offering a no-strings-attached loan in writing or helping her find resources rather than fixing things myself. It sounded obvious, but I had been so focused on solving the problem quickly that I skipped the human part. A few days later, Emily asked if we could meet again. This time, she came to my apartment. She said she had been thinking a lot and talking with her uncle and with a therapist provided through her work. She told me she was willing to try rebuilding trust slowly, but with very clear boundaries. One of those boundaries was that I would never access her personal accounts again for any reason. Another was that if money was discussed, it would be on her terms. She also told me something that surprised me. She said despite everything she appreciated that I wanted to help and that she did not want to push me away permanently. She admitted that part of her difficulty with money is tied to shame and fear, and that she might need to work on that too. Hearing her take responsibility for her own issues while still holding me accountable made me respect her even more. We are technically still on a break, but we are talking regularly now. I offered to help her draft an email to her landlord instead of sending it myself. I also helped her look into short-term assistance programs for caregivers. All of that was done with her sitting next to me and approving every step. It feels slower and less dramatic, but also healthier. Her mom passed away last week. That has been devastating, and I will not pretend otherwise. Emily called me the night it happened and asked me to come over. I held her while she cried, and for the first time since all of this started, it felt like we were on the same side again. I do not know what the future holds for us. There is still hurt there, and trust takes time to rebuild. What I do know is that love is not about fixing things behind someone's back even when you think you know best. It is about respect, patience, and letting the other person lead their own life even when watching them struggle hurts. If we make it through this, it will be because we learned how to communicate instead of control. And if we do not, at least, I will carry this lesson with me for the rest of my life. Final update. Trying to secretly help my girlfriend with money and making everything worse. I waited a long time before writing this because I did not want to do it while emotions were still raw, and honestly because I was scared of admitting how everything finally landed. Life did not snap back into place, and there was no big movie moment where everything felt fixed, but there was an ending, and it mattered. After Linda's funeral, things changed in a quiet, heavy way. Emily stayed with me for a few nights because she could not stand being alone. We did not talk much about our relationship during that time. We watched old shows she had already seen and ate takeout and sat in silence more than anything else. I focused on being present and not solving anything. That was harder than I expected, but I stuck to it. About 2 weeks after the funeral, Emily asked if we could talk seriously. She warned me ahead of time that the conversation might hurt, and that she needed me to listen without interrupting. We sat on the couch and she held her hands together so tightly her knuckles were white. She told me she cared about me deeply and that I had been a source of comfort during the worst period of her life. She also said that when she imagined the future, she still felt a wall she could not get past. She explained that even though she understood why I did what I did, the way it happened changed how she saw me. She said she no longer felt fully relaxed around me, and that she found herself double-checking things that never used to cross her mind. She hated feeling that way and did not want to grow resentful. Hearing that felt like someone slowly tightening a vice around my chest. I asked her if there was anything I could do to repair that trust over time. She thought for a long moment and then told me the hardest truth of all. She said maybe trust was not something that could always be rebuilt once it broke this way, and that it was not fair to either of us to keep trying if one of us was forcing themselves to feel safe. We both cried, not dramatic sobbing, just quiet, exhausted crying. There was no yelling, no blame being thrown around. We decided to end the relationship that night, not because we stopped loving each other, but because love alone was not enough to undo what had been damaged. The days after that were rough. I moved her remaining things into boxes and helped load them into her car. We hugged for a long time before she drove away. She told me she hoped one day we could look back on this without pain. I told her I hoped she found peace and stability and that I was grateful for the time we had. Since then, I have started therapy myself. I needed to understand why my instinct under stress is to take control instead of asking permission. I am learning that helping without consent is not kindness, it is ego mixed with fear. That realization has been uncomfortable but necessary. Emily and I still check in occasionally. Short messages on birthdays or difficult days. There is no bitterness between us, just distance. I heard through Sarah that Emily moved closer to her work and is doing better financially. That makes me genuinely happy. I am sharing this final update because I want people to understand that good intentions do not protect you from consequences. You can love someone and still hurt them in ways that cannot be undone. Respecting boundaries matters even when you think you are saving someone from drowning. This experience changed me. I move slower now. I ask more questions. I listen when someone says no, even if every part of me wants to fix the problem anyway. Losing Emily was painful, but if I carry this lesson forward, then at least something meaningful came out of it. Stories number 5. Changing a name after everything fell apart. I never thought my life would turn into something that sounds like a Reddit post, but here I am typing this out, because I do not know if I did the right thing, and I cannot talk about this openly with people in my real life without it turning into a fight. I am a 34-year-old man living in Ohio, and up until last year, my biggest worries were work deadlines and whether my car would survive another winter. My sister Melissa has always lived louder than me. She is 2 years older and has been bouncing between jobs and relationships since we were teenagers. I do not judge her for the choices she made with her body or her career, even though our parents always did. She moved to Florida in her early 20s and eventually became a dancer at a club in Tampa. She made decent money some months and nothing other months, and she lived fast. Melissa had my niece when she was 23. My niece's name is Amber. I was around when Amber was a baby, but after Melissa moved states, we mostly stayed connected through phone calls and occasional visits. Amber grew up around the club environment, whether people like it or not. Melissa worked nights, so Amber stayed with sitters and sometimes coworkers. It was not ideal, but it was not the horror story people imagine either. Amber always sounded cheerful when she talked to me, and she loved music and dance. Things started going downhill when Amber was 16. Melissa got arrested for a Dewey with drugs in the car. Child services got involved, and Amber was placed temporarily with Melissa's friend Tanya. I was called as next of kin and asked if I could take Amber if things got worse. I said yes without really understanding what that meant. 6 months later, Melissa violated probation and was sentenced to a year. That was when the court asked me if I would take full custody of Amber. I live alone. I do not have kids. I had never planned to be a parent overnight. But the idea of my niece bouncing through foster care felt wrong, so I agreed. Amber moved in with me just after her 17th birthday. She came with 2 suitcases and a chip on her shoulder the size of a mountain. She was angry at her mom. She was angry at the system. She was angry at me even though I had done nothing but open my door. The first few months were rough. She skipped school. She talked back. She partied. I set rules. She ignored them. We fought constantly. I tried therapy. She refused. I tried being strict. She rebelled harder. The biggest conflict started when I discovered she had been working at a local strip club using a stage name she had adopted years earlier when she started dancing at underground parties in Florida. She was still under 18 when she started using it. The name was Raven Blaze. She told me it made her feel powerful and separate from everything else. I freaked out when I found out. I went straight to the club. I talked to the manager, Rick, and told him she was a minor and my legal responsibility. He said she had fake ID and that they would fire her immediately. I pulled Amber out that night and grounded her, which just made everything worse. Amber screamed at me that I was trying to erase her. She said Raven Blaze was who she really was, and Amber was just a name her mom gave her before everything went to hell. I told her that as long as she lived under my roof, she would not be stripping. She accused me of being just like our parents. Around this time, we had our first court review hearing. The judge, Karen Whitfield, asked how Amber was adjusting. I said honestly that it was difficult, but we were trying. Amber told the judge she wanted to stay with me because at least I was stable. That was the first time I realized how scared she actually was. After that hearing, I doubled down on trying to create structure. I enrolled her in a new school. I limited her phone. I made her go to counseling with a woman named Dr. Elaine Porter. Slowly, things started to shift. Amber began opening up in therapy. She talked about growing up around men who saw her as a fantasy. She talked about how the name Raven Blaze was armor. The real blow-up happened when I found out she had legally changed her name paperwork online to Raven Blaze the day she turned 18. She had not filed it yet, but she had everything ready. I panicked. I felt like I was losing her to something dangerous. I contacted my lawyer, Jason Miller, and asked if I could prevent the name change since I still had custody until she graduated high school. He said it was a gray area, but as her guardian, I could object and delay it. I did that without telling Amber first. When she found out, she exploded. She told me I had no right. She accused me of trying to control her identity. She said I did not understand her world. She packed a bag and tried to leave. I had to physically block the door and call Dr. Porter to talk her down. That night, Amber cried harder than I had ever seen. She said her mom had encouraged the name because it helped her survive. She said stripping was the only thing she was good at. I told her that was not true. I told her she was smart and creative and that she could choose something else. A week later, something unexpected happened. Melissa called me from prison. She had heard from Amber about the name issue. I expected her to tear into me. Instead, she was quiet. She told me she regretted a lot of things. She said she gave Amber that world because she did not know how to give her anything else. She said maybe Amber deserved a chance to be just Amber for a while. With Melissa's reluctant support, I went back to court and formally objected to the name change. The judge agreed to delay it until Amber finished school and turned 19. I thought that would calm things down. It did not. Amber stopped talking to me for weeks. She went through the motions, but the warmth was gone. I questioned myself every day. Was I protecting her or projecting my fears? Was I erasing her or giving her space to grow? The turning point came at her school talent showcase. Amber signed up without telling me. When I arrived, she was on stage dancing, but not in the way I expected. It was modern dance. emotional and raw. When they announced her name, they said Amber Collins. She chose to use her legal name. I cried in my seat like an idiot. After the show, she hugged me for the first time in months. She said Raven Blaze was a part of her, but it did not have to be all of her. She said maybe she wanted to redefine what power meant. Now she is 18 and a half. She still dances. She still pushes boundaries. She still gets mad at me. But she is also applying to community college for performing arts. The name change paperwork is still on hold. She has not brought it up again. People around me are divided. My friend Mark thinks I overstepped and that names are personal. My coworker Denise says I did what a parent should do. Melissa is still in prison, but writes letters thanking me and sometimes accusing me in the same page. So here I am wondering if I crossed a line by changing the course of something so personal. I did not rename her without consent, but I did block a name she chose for herself. I did it because I thought it was tied to exploitation and trauma. But maybe that was my judgment talking. I love my niece like she is my own. I would burn the world down to protect her. I just do not know if protection sometimes looks too much like control. Update. Changing a name after everything fell apart. A lot has happened since I last wrote this, and I honestly did not expect things to keep unfolding the way they did. When I posted before, I was stuck in my own head, wondering if I had messed up beyond repair. Life did not pause while I waited for clarity, and I think that is what finally forced some real conversations instead of everyone just reacting out of fear. About 2 months after the talent showcase, Amber came home one evening, unusually quiet. She sat at the kitchen table while I was making dinner and just watched me for a while. I could feel something heavy coming. Eventually, she asked if we could talk without me trying to fix anything. That alone told me how much damage the past year had done between us. She told me she had been in contact with some girls she used to dance with in Florida. One of them, Olivia, had just turned 19 and had gone fully into the club scene. Amber said Olivia sounded exhausted and scared, but also trapped because her whole identity was tied to the persona she had created. Hearing that shook Amber more than anything I had said to her before. She admitted that part of why she was so angry at me was because she was terrified I might be right, and that scared her more than me being wrong. I told her something I had been holding back. I admitted that when I first agreed to take custody, I did not think I was good enough for it. I told her I was afraid of failing her, and that blocking the name change came from panic, not from a desire to own her life. I apologized without adding a but to it. That was hard. I am not good at apologizing cleanly. She cried again, but this time it felt different. Less explosive, more tired. She said she did not want to be a symbol of either rebellion or rescue. She just wanted space to figure herself out without adults pulling her in opposite directions. Not long after that, we had another court review. Judge Whitfield asked Amber directly how she felt about staying with me now that she was legally an adult. Amber said she wanted to stay at least until she finished her first year of college because she needed stability while she figured out next steps. Hearing her say that out loud in a courtroom did something to me. It felt like being trusted in a way I had not experienced before. Melissa was present by video this time because she was up for an early release hearing. She looked different, thinner, and quieter. When the judge asked if she had any objections, Melissa said no. She said she was grateful Amber had someone who showed up, even when it was uncomfortable. That sentence has replayed in my head more times than I can count. A week after that, Amber surprised me again. She told me she wanted to revisit the name issue, but not in the way I expected. She said she was not sure she wanted Raven Blaze as a legal name anymore, but she also did not want to pretend it never existed. She asked if I would support her using it artistically while keeping Amber Collins as her legal identity for now. She wanted the choice to be hers without it being a fight. I said yes immediately, maybe too quickly. She laughed and said she appreciated that I did not try to negotiate. We filled out paperwork to formally withdraw the pending name change. Not because I forced it, but because she decided to pause it herself. That distinction mattered to her, and I am learning it matters to me too. Things have not magically become perfect. We still argue. she still tests limits. I still have moments where I have to remind myself she is not a problem to solve. A few weeks ago, I found out she had gone to a club with friends, and my stomach dropped even though she was just watching and not performing. I wanted to lecture. Instead, I asked how it made her feel. She said it made her sad and angry and relieved all at once. That conversation ended with both of us emotionally drained but honest. Melissa was released early last month and is currently living in a halfway house in Georgia. She and Amber have been cautiously rebuilding their relationship. That has brought up a whole new layer of complicated emotions. Amber sometimes comes home defensive after talking to her mom. Other times, she is hopeful. Melissa called me once to apologize for putting me in this position, and then 2 days later, accused me of turning her daughter against her. I am learning not to take either extreme as the full truth. Financially, things have been tight, but manageable. Amber got a part-time job teaching dance to kids at a community center. Watching her come home sweaty and smiling from that, instead of guarded and hollow, has been one of the quiet victories I never expected. She uses her real name there and seems proud of it. As for me, I have been in my own therapy now. Dr. Porter suggested it early on, and I resisted because I thought this was all about Amber. Turns out a lot of it is about my need to control outcomes to feel safe. That has been uncomfortable to face. I am realizing that stepping in to protect someone does not mean steering their entire identity. People still have opinions. Mark still thinks I should have stayed out of it completely. Denise still tells me I did the right thing at the right time. Strangers online had strong reactions too. What has changed is that Amber and I actually talk about those opinions now, instead of using them as weapons against each other. I do not know what Amber will choose in the future. She might still legally change her name one day. She might step back into the club world as an adult with clearer boundaries. She might do something completely different. What I do know is that right now, she is safe housed in thinking instead of just surviving. Looking back, I can see that my actions were not perfect and maybe not even correct by some standards. But they came from love mixed with fear, and I am learning to separate the two. If there is one thing this whole experience has taught me, it is that being a guardian is less about authority and more about staying present even when the choices scare you. I still do not have a clean answer about whether I crossed a line. Maybe the answer changes over time. All I know is that Amber still calls this place home, and when she does it, sounds like trust, not obligation. That feels like something worth holding on to. Stories number 6. I am being blackmailed for cheating on my wife. I never thought I would admit this anywhere, but I am running out of places to put the truth. I am 38, and my wife Danielle is 36. We have been married for 11 years and together since college. We live in Pennsylvania. We have 2 kids and a life that from the outside looks stable and boring in the safest way possible. About 8 months ago, I made a choice that I knew was wrong the moment it happened. I started an affair with a woman named Brooke. She was not a stranger from the internet or a random hookup. She was someone I met through work at a regional conference in Maryland. We talked over drinks after a long day of meetings, and it felt easy in a way I had not felt in years. That is not an excuse. It is just the truth of how it started. Danielle and I were not in a great place at the time, but we were not on the edge of divorce either. We were tired. We argued about money and schedules and parenting. We stopped talking about anything deeper than logistics. I should have addressed that with my wife or with a therapist. Instead, I chased the feeling of being seen without responsibility. The affair lasted about 3 months. It was mostly messages and calls with a handful of in-person meetings when travel lined up. There was secrecy and lies and constant anxiety. I hated myself and also kept going. Eventually, the guilt became unbearable, and I ended it. Brooke did not take it well, but she did not explode either. She said she understood and wished me well. I believed that was the end. 2 months later, I received an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line was my full name. Inside were screenshots of messages between Brooke and me. Messages that would destroy my marriage if Danielle saw them. The email said that if I did not want my wife to find out, I needed to pay to keep things quiet. No threats of violence, no dramatic language, just a number and a deadline. At first I thought it was a scam. Then a second email arrived with more screenshots including photos that only Brooke could have had. My heart dropped. I replied asking what they wanted. The response came quickly. $5,000 within a week. If I paid, there would be no further contact. If I did not, the information would be sent to my wife and possibly my employer. I did not sleep that night or the next. I barely functioned at work. I kept looking at Danielle and feeling sick. She trusted me completely. She still does as far as I know. That is the worst part. I considered confessing immediately. I also considered paying and burying it. I know how that sounds. I know how cowardly it is. But the fear of blowing up my kids' lives over my own mistake paralyzed me. I contacted a lawyer named Andrew for a consultation without telling anyone why. I framed it as a hypothetical. He told me blackmail is illegal and that paying does not guarantee it stops. He said once someone knows you will pay, they often come back for more. He also said that involving the police is complicated when the underlying act is an affair that could still cause personal fallout even if the blackmailer is charged. I asked Brooke directly if she was involved. She denied it and swore she would never do this. I do not know if she is lying or if someone else got access to her messages. Either way, the result is the same. The deadline came and I panicked. I transferred the money. I hated myself while doing it. For a week there was silence, and I thought maybe I had escaped the consequences. Then another email arrived. This time, the amount was higher. The tone was colder. The message said they knew I would pay, because I already had. That was when it finally hit me that there is no version of this where I come out clean without telling the truth. I am living under a threat that could drop at any moment. I jump every time Danielle checks her phone. I am constantly on edge. I am not present with my kids. I am trapped by my own choices. I have not told Danielle yet. Every day I wake up thinking today will be the day, and every day I lose my nerve. I tell myself I am protecting my family, but deep down I know I am protecting myself from the consequences of my actions. I am being blackmailed because I cheated, and there is no one else to blame. I do not know if the right move is to go to the police or to confess or both. I do know that paying again will only make this worse. I also know that whatever happens next is going to hurt people who did nothing wrong. I am writing this because I needed to put the truth somewhere before it eats me alive. Update. I am being blackmailed for cheating on my wife. A lot changed after I posted, and none of it was easy, but the waiting and hiding became worse than the fear of what would happen once the truth was out. The second demand for money shook me in a way the first one did not, because it proved exactly what the lawyer warned me about. There was no endpoint. There was only escalation. I did not pay again. Instead, I went back to Andrew and showed him everything. The emails, the screenshots, the payment confirmation. He was very direct with me. He said if I wanted any chance of stopping this cycle, I needed to document everything and prepare for 2 hard conversations, one with law enforcement and one with my wife. He also said I needed to accept that those conversations would not protect me from personal consequences even if they helped legally. I filed a police report. Sitting in that station, explaining why someone had leverage over me, was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I did not try to minimize what I did. I told them I had an affair and that someone was using that information to extort money from me. They took it seriously and told me to stop engaging with the sender completely. They also warned me that cases like this do not always move quickly and that I should prepare myself for the possibility that the blackmailer might still follow through. That night I told Danielle everything. Not a sanitized version, not a partial confession. I told her about the affair, how it started, how long it lasted. I told her about the emails and the money and the police report. I expected screaming. I expected her to throw me out. What I did not expect was the silence. She listened without interrupting. She did not cry at first. She just stared at me like she was trying to reconcile the person she thought I was with the one sitting in front of her. When she finally spoke, she said she needed space and asked me to leave for a few days. I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother Michael. The days that followed were brutal. Danielle barely responded to messages, except about the kids. She told them I was on a work trip. I hated that lie almost as much as I hated myself for creating the situation that required it. I replayed everything over and over, wishing I had chosen differently at every step. A week later, Danielle agreed to talk. She told me the affair hurt, but the blackmail hurt differently. She said knowing I paid to keep her in the dark made her feel like a fool in her own marriage. She said trust was not just broken, it was shattered. I did not defend myself. There was nothing to defend. She asked if I wanted to stay married. I said yes, but also told her I understood if she did not. I told her I would do whatever she needed, including counseling or separation. She said she did not know what she wanted, and that my job was not to convince her. That sentence hit me hard because it mirrored something I had read before in a different context, and I finally understood it from the other side. As for the blackmailer, there has been no further contact since the police report. The detective told me that sometimes filing is enough to scare them off, especially if they were bluffing about going wider. There is still an open investigation, but I am not holding my breath for closure there. Danielle and I are currently in couples therapy with a counselor named Karen. Some sessions are quiet and painful. Some are angry. Some are just exhausting. We are also discussing legal options quietly so we both understand what separation would look like if that is where this ends. It is strange and heartbreaking to talk about marriage counseling and divorce logistics in the same breath, but that is where we are. I am not pretending this will all work out. I am also not pretending I deserve forgiveness. What I do know is that telling the truth stopped the bleeding even though it caused a different kind of pain. The fear of being exposed is gone. Now there is just reality and consequences and the slow work of figuring out what comes next. If there is one thing I have learned, it is that secrets rot everything they touch. I thought I was avoiding destruction by hiding and paying and lying. All I was doing was delaying it and making it worse. Whether my marriage survives or not, at least the decisions from here forward will be honest ones. Final update. I am being blackmailed for cheating on my wife. This will be the last time I write about this because the situation has reached a point where there is nothing left to wait for or hope will magically resolve itself. The truth has settled and the consequences are no longer hypothetical. A few weeks after my last update, the detective contacted me to let me know they had identified the source of the emails. It was Brooke. There was no hacked account and no third party. She admitted to everything when confronted with the evidence, including the payment I sent and the follow-up demand. She claimed she was angry and felt disposable and justified it by saying I ruined her emotionally first. Hearing that did not shock me. It just confirmed what I already knew, which is that my choices created a situation where someone else had power over my life. Charges are moving forward. I am cooperating fully. The detective made it clear that regardless of how things play out legally, this does not erase the damage done to my marriage. I never expected it to. Danielle and I stayed in counseling for several more weeks after my last post. The sessions became less emotional and more practical over time. She asked questions that were hard to hear, but fair. She wanted timelines. She wanted clarity. She wanted to know if there was anything else she did not know. I answered everything honestly, even when it made me look worse. Eventually, she told me she was done. Not angrily, not dramatically. She said she could not rebuild trust with someone who made so many choices against her and then tried to manage the fallout instead of facing it. She said she believed I was remorseful, but remorse was not the same as safety. That sentence ended the marriage more than any paperwork ever could. We decided to separate formally. The kids know now in an age-appropriate way. We told them together. Danielle handled it with a strength I do not deserve. We are focused on keeping their routine stable and shielding them from adult details they should not have to carry. We are working with attorneys to finalize custody and financial arrangements. It is civil. Painful, but civil. Danielle has not tried to punish me, and I have not tried to argue or minimize. I am getting an apartment nearby so I can stay involved with the kids' lives. That part matters more to me than anything else at this point. Emotionally, I am not okay, but I am no longer hiding. There is a strange clarity that comes from having everything out in the open. I lost my marriage. I damaged the person who trusted me most. I put my family at risk for temporary validation and excitement. I will carry that for the rest of my life. I am continuing individual therapy, not to fix the marriage, but to understand why I made the choices I did and how to never repeat them. I am also learning to sit with guilt without trying to outrun it or justify it. As for the blackmail, it is no longer the center of this story. It was a consequence, not the core problem. The core problem was my dishonesty long before any emails were sent or money was transferred. If anyone reading this is looking for reassurance that there's a clean way out of cheating, there is not. If you are looking for proof that paying to hide it will save your family, it will not. All it does is delay the reckoning and make it uglier. I do not know what my future looks like beyond co-parenting and rebuilding myself from a place of accountability. I do know that the truth eventually comes out one way or another. I learned that too late, but I learned it all the same. Stories number 7. Setting boundaries with my son about his girlfriend being in our home. I never imagined I would be in this position with my own child, and I keep going back and forth wondering if I am being a reasonable parent or if I am damaging my relationship with my son over something. That should not be this complicated. I am 46 and a single mother living in Ohio. My son Tyler is 21 and goes to a local college while working part-time. Because of housing costs and school, he still lives at home with me. I do not charge him rent, but he helps with groceries and does chores. Overall, we have always had a good relationship. We talk openly, and I try hard not to be controlling because my own parents were very strict and it pushed me away from them for years. About 8 months ago, Tyler started dating a girl named Madison. She is 20 and seems nice enough. I met her a few times early on, and she was polite and quiet. Over time, she started coming over more often, which made sense because Tyler lives here and they are young and want to spend time together. The problem started slowly, and then all at once. Madison began coming over when Tyler was not home. At first, it was small things like she would show up an hour before he got back from work and wait in his room. Tyler told me about it ahead of time and asked if that was okay. I said yes because it did not seem like a big deal. I work from home, so I was always there. Then it became more frequent. She would come over in the morning after Tyler left for class and stay for hours. Sometimes I would come out of my office to make coffee and find her in the kitchen, using my dishes or sitting on the couch watching TV. She would say hi and act like this was totally normal. I felt awkward in my own home, but I told myself I was being dramatic. Things escalated when I realized she was letting herself in with the spare key. Tyler had given her the code to the garage without asking me. One afternoon, I came downstairs in my pajamas to grab laundry, and Madison was standing there. I nearly had a heart attack. She laughed it off and said, "Sorry, I did not mean to scare you." I smiled, but inside, I was furious. I talked to Tyler that night and told him I was uncomfortable with Madison being in the house when he was not home. I explained that it is my house and I need to feel relaxed and safe in it. I also told him I did not like that he gave her access without asking me. He got defensive immediately and said I was treating him like a child and that Madison did nothing wrong. I tried to compromise. I said Madison is welcome when you are home, but I am not okay with her being here alone. He said that was unfair and embarrassing. He said other parents do not care about things like that. I told him Other parents are not me, and other houses are not my house. For a few weeks, things seemed better. Madison stopped coming over alone, and Tyler was cold but civil. Then I started noticing signs that she was still coming over while he was gone. Lights on. Food missing. The shower used. One day I found her shoes by the door while Tyler was at work. I waited in my room until he got home and then confronted him. He admitted she had been coming over and said he did not think it was a big deal because I was home anyway. I said the issue is not whether I am home, but that I did not consent. I told him clearly that this was a boundary, and he ignored it. He accused me of not trusting him and said I was ruining his relationship. Things blew up when Madison confronted me directly. She cornered me in the kitchen one afternoon and said she feels unwelcome and judged. She said she is not doing anything wrong and that she feels like I am treating her like a criminal. I told her calmly that this is not about her character, but about my comfort in my own home. I said I would feel the same way about anyone. She said if I trusted my son, I would not have a problem with it. That hit a nerve. I told her trust has nothing to do with it, and that adults have boundaries too. She left in tears, and Tyler did not speak to me for days. Since then, the house has been tense. Tyler barely looks at me. He spends most nights at Madison's place now. I miss him, but I also feel like I am being pushed to give up my own comfort to keep the peace. Friends are split. Some say I am absolutely right and that it is inappropriate for a girlfriend to treat my house like her own. Others say Tyler is an adult and I need to loosen the reins or risk losing him. What hurts the most is that this was never about control. I do not care if they hang out. I do not care if they are together all the time. I just want my home to feel like my space again. I want to walk to the kitchen without wondering who is going to be there. I want to know who has access to my house. I told Tyler recently that if he wants complete freedom, he may need to consider moving out when he can afford it. I said this calmly and not as a threat. He took it as one anyway and said, I am choosing my comfort over my relationship with him. I told him I am choosing respect. Now, I am lying awake at night, wondering if I handled this all wrong. I wonder if this is the moment that permanently changes our relationship. I also wonder if giving in would just teach him that my boundaries do not matter. I love my son more than anything, but I am struggling with the idea that being a good parent means making myself uncomfortable in my own home to keep him happy. Update: setting boundaries with my son about his girlfriend being in our home. A lot has happened since I last wrote, and I am still trying to process how something that seemed like a simple boundary turned into a much bigger issue about independence trust and what our relationship looks like. Now that my son is an adult. After the tension kept building, Tyler eventually asked if we could talk. I was relieved because the silence in the house was unbearable. We sat at the kitchen table late at night, and for the first time he actually listened instead of immediately getting defensive. He told me he feels like he is stuck between being an adult and being treated like a kid. He said living at home makes him feel like he has no real space of his own, and that having Madison there when he is gone made him feel like his life was still happening even when he was not home. I told him I could understand that feeling, but that it does not override my right to feel comfortable in my own house. I explained again that it was not about Madison personally. I told him how startled and anxious I felt walking into rooms and not knowing someone else was there. I admitted that I felt disrespected when he gave her access without asking me, and then continued after I said no. He surprised me by apologizing for giving her the code without permission. He said he did not think about it from my perspective and just assumed it would be fine. That was the first time I felt like maybe we were getting somewhere. I apologized too for not addressing it more firmly earlier and letting resentment build instead of setting a clear boundary from the start. The next day, Madison came over with Tyler and asked to talk to me as well. I was nervous, but I agreed. She told me she felt embarrassed and unwanted, and that she did not realize how much it bothered me. She said at her parents' house, it was normal for partners to come and go, and she assumed the same applied here. I told her I understood that different families work differently, but that this house is my personal space and not a shared apartment. The conversation stayed calm until she said she felt like I was pushing Tyler away and that he would eventually move out and not come back. That hurt because it echoed my own fear. I told her I am not trying to push him away, but I am also not willing to erase myself to keep him close. I said boundaries are not punishments and that learning to respect them is part of growing up. For a short while, things improved. Madison stopped coming over when Tyler was gone, and Tyler seemed more relaxed at home. Then another issue came up that made me realize this was not fully resolved. I noticed that Tyler was spending more and more nights at Madison's place and barely coming home. When he was home, he stayed in his room. It felt like he was slowly moving out emotionally without saying it out loud. One evening, he told me he was thinking about moving in with Madison and a roommate next year. I had mixed feelings. Part of me felt sad, and part of me felt relieved. I told him I support him becoming independent, but that I want him to do it because he is ready, not because he is angry. He said maybe it is a bit of both. Things came to a head when Madison's roommate backed out of their housing plan, and Tyler asked if Madison could temporarily stay with us during the day while he was at work, because she works evenings and did not want to be alone at her place. I said no. I said I was not comfortable reopening that door and that it would blur the boundary all over again. Tyler got frustrated and said I was being inflexible. I told him being flexible does not mean abandoning my limits. I suggested other options, like her staying at the library or a coffee shop, or him adjusting his schedule when possible. He said those were inconvenient. I said sometimes adulthood is inconvenient. That night, he packed a bag and went to Madison's place. He texted me later saying he needs space and that he feels like he cannot fully be himself in my house anymore. I cried harder than I have in years. Not because I regretted my boundary, but because I hated that this was the cost. A week later, he came back to pick up more things, and we talked again. He told me he loves me, and that he knows I am not trying to hurt him, but that living at home makes him feel trapped. I told him I love him too, and that my door is always open, but my boundaries still stand. I said if he chooses to live elsewhere, I will support him, but I will not be guilted into giving up my comfort to prevent him from leaving. We are in a strange in-between place now. He stays here a few nights a week and the rest with Madison. Things are calmer, but more distant. I miss the closeness we had, but I also feel more at peace in my own home. I am starting to realize that this may be a painful but necessary transition. He is growing into his own life, and I am learning how to let go without disappearing. I still wonder sometimes if I could have handled things differently. But I also know that teaching him to respect boundaries even when he does not like them may be one of the most important lessons I can give him. I hope one day he looks back and understands that this was never about control or mistrust. It was about two adults learning how to share space without losing themselves. Update 2. Setting boundaries with my son about his girlfriend being in our home. I waited longer than I expected before writing this, because I needed time to see how things actually settled instead of reacting in the middle of the emotions, and I am glad I did, because the situation has changed in ways I did not fully anticipate. After Tyler started splitting his time between my house and Madison's place, the initial tension faded, but it was replaced with a quiet distance that felt heavier somehow. We were polite. We talked about practical things. But the easy conversations and spontaneous moments were gone. I missed hearing about his day without having to ask. I missed cooking dinner together. At the same time, I noticed something else. I was sleeping better. I was less anxious in my own home. I stopped bracing myself every time I walked out of my bedroom. About a month after he started staying away more often, Tyler asked if we could have another serious talk. This time, he was calmer than I had seen him in a long time. He told me that living partially on his own had been eye-opening. He said he did not realize how much he relied on me until he had to manage his own schedule meals and responsibilities more consistently. He also admitted that some of his anger came from embarrassment. He said it made him feel immature, that he could not afford his own place yet, and that my boundary made that insecurity impossible to ignore. That conversation softened something in me. I told him I never judged him for still living at home, and that I know the economy is brutal right now. I said my boundary was never meant to push him out, but to keep the dynamic healthy while he was still here. He nodded and said he is starting to understand that now, even if it took him a while. Then something unexpected happened. Tyler told me he and Madison were having problems. He said once he started spending more time at her place, he noticed things he had not before. He said she struggled with respecting boundaries in other areas too. She would go through his phone. She would get upset if he wanted time alone. She assumed access instead of asking in ways that suddenly felt familiar to him. He actually said it out loud. He said, "I think this is what you were trying to explain to me." That moment broke my heart and healed it at the same time. I did not say I told you so. I just listened. I told him relationships are about mutual respect and that learning what you need and what you cannot accept is part of growing up. A few weeks later, he told me they broke up. It was not dramatic or explosive, but it was painful. He moved fully back home for the time being and asked if that was okay. I said, of course. When he came back this time, it felt different. He asked before inviting friends over. He checked in about schedules. He treated the house less like a default and more like a shared space. We also had a very honest conversation about the future. Tyler said he wants to move out within the next year and asked if I would help him plan financially instead of just pushing him out. I told him I would absolutely help, and we started going through budgets together. It felt like we were finally on the same team again instead of on opposite sides. As for me, I have been doing my own reflecting. I realized how hard it was for me to hold that boundary because part of me was afraid of being alone. I had to confront the fact that my role as a mother is changing whether I like it or not. I am not needed in the same way anymore, and that is both painful and freeing. Looking back, I still do not think my boundary was wrong. If anything, I think it forced a necessary shift that was going to happen sooner or later. I also learned that boundaries do not guarantee immediate understanding. Sometimes they create distance before they create respect. That was the hardest part to accept. Tyler and I are closer now in a quieter, more adult way. We talk openly about expectations. We laugh again. The house feels like a home instead of a battleground. I know there will be more growing pains ahead, but I feel more confident now that choosing respect for myself did not mean losing my son. It meant teaching both of us how to move forward without resentment. Final update: setting boundaries with my son about his girlfriend being in our home. I think enough time has passed now that I can finally see the situation clearly instead of through fear, guilt, or adrenaline, and I wanted to write one last time to close this chapter for myself as much as anything else. Tyler has now been fully back home for several months, and the difference in how we live together compared to before is night and day. There is a level of mutual respect that simply was not there before all of this happened. He asks before making plans that affect the house. He lets me know his schedule. I do the same for him. It no longer feels like I am tiptoeing around my own space or like he is sneaking around trying to live an adult life under my roof. We continued working on his plan to move out, and instead of it being driven by resentment, it became a goal we were both invested in. We sat down and looked at his income, his expenses, his savings, and what he realistically needs to live on his own. I helped him open a separate savings account just for housing. He started picking up extra shifts when he could not, because I pushed him, but because he wanted to feel capable. One night a few weeks ago, we had a long conversation that I think finally sealed everything. He told me he used to think boundaries were about control, and now he understands they are about clarity. He said when he was with Madison, he confused access with closeness, and that it took losing that relationship to see the difference. Hearing my son articulate that told me this whole painful process actually taught him something meaningful. He also apologized again without me prompting him. He said he was wrong to dismiss my discomfort and wrong to frame my boundary as a lack of trust. He admitted he was projecting his frustration about his own situation onto me. I told him I forgive him and that I am proud of him for owning it. We both cried a little and laughed about how dramatic we both are. As for Madison, there has been no contact, and that feels appropriate. I do not feel anger toward her anymore. I see now that she was young and operating on assumptions just like Tyler was. I do not think she was malicious. I think she simply did not know how to exist in someone else's space without claiming it. That is something a lot of people have to learn the hard way. I have also changed through this. I learned that protecting my comfort is not selfish. I learned that avoiding conflict does not actually preserve relationships. It just delays the damage. I learned that my fear of losing my son almost led me to erase myself, and that would have bred resentment on both sides. Tyler is planning to move out within the next 6 months if everything stays on track. I know that day will be emotional for me, but it no longer feels like rejection. It feels like a natural next step. I feel confident that when he leaves it will be from a place of readiness, not anger. Our relationship now feels more honest than it has in years. We are not clinging to each other out of obligation or fear. We choose to spend time together. We respect each other as adults, sharing space instead of as parent and child locked in a power struggle. If I could go back, I might have communicated sooner and more clearly before things built up. But I would not change the boundary itself. Holding it changed both of us for the better, even though it hurt at first. For anyone struggling with something similar, I have learned this. You can love someone deeply and still say no. You can be supportive without surrendering your space. And sometimes the thing that feels like it might break a relationship is actually what saves it in the long run. Stories number 8. After 10 years together, my boyfriend says I should just give my DOB to his mom, but in my culture, that has bigger implications. Am I overreacting? I have been with my boyfriend Mark for 10 years. We met in college, grew up together in a lot of ways, and built a life that feels solid most days. We rent a small house, share a dog, share bills, share stress, and share plans for the future. He is American-born. His whole family is. I am also in the USA now, but I grew up in a different culture, and some things that seem small to him are not small to me. This all started because his mom, Carol, is planning a big family gathering. She wants to make one of those memory books where she puts everyone's birthday, photos, little facts, and stories. She already has Mark's birthday, obviously, and she has his siblings' birthdays, and now she wants mine. Mark came into the kitchen one evening while I was cooking and said, "Hey, my mom wants your date of birth for her book." I paused. I didn't say no right away. I just said, "Why does she need the full date?" He said, "So she can put it in the book." Month, day, year. I said, "I'm not really comfortable giving my full DOB. He laughed a little. Not in a mean way, just confused. He said, "Why?" "It's just your birthday," I tried to explain. In my culture, giving your full date of birth, especially the year, has meaning. It can be tied to beliefs about fate, luck, marriage compatibility, even bad things people can wish on you. I don't fully follow all of it, but I grew up around it. It sticks in your bones. My parents always taught me to be careful who I give that information to. I told him, I'm fine with giving her my birthday, like month and day. I just don't want to give the year. He frowned. He said, "That's weird. She's my mom." "She's not going to curse you or something," I said. "I know she won't, but it still makes me uncomfortable." He rolled his eyes a little and said, "You're overthinking it. That hurt." Not because he disagreed, but because he dismissed it like it was nothing. A few days later, Carol called Mark while we were both in the living room. I could hear her voice through the phone, loud and cheerful. She said, "Did you get her birthday yet?" Mark looked at me and said, "She's being weird about it." I felt my face get hot. He hadn't even tried to explain my side. He just called me weird. He told his mom, She doesn't want to give her year for some cultural reason. Carol laughed. She actually laughed. She said, "Well, that's silly. Tell her I need the whole thing." Mark said, "Yeah, I'll tell her." After he hung up, I said, "Why didn't you explain it better?" He said, "I did explain. She thinks it's silly. And honestly, so do I." That turned into a fight. I said, "You don't have to believe it to respect it." He said, "It's just a number. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I said, "It's not nothing to me." He said, "Sometimes you have to adjust to how things work here." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. I have adjusted so much. I learned new holidays, new food, new ways of talking, new expectations. I never once asked him to give up anything important to him. All I asked was to keep one small boundary. The next day, Carol texted me directly. She said, "Hi, sweetie. Mark says you don't want to give your birthday for my book. I promise I just want to include you like family." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't know how to answer without sounding rude or dramatic. Finally, I said, "I'm happy to give you my birthday, just not the year. It's something I'm not comfortable sharing." She replied, "That seems a little secretive, but okay." That word, secretive, made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Mark was annoyed when he found out I texted her myself. He said, "Now she thinks you don't trust her." I said, "I never said that. I just said I wasn't comfortable." He said, "You're making things awkward for no reason." Then he said the sentence that made me come here and write this. He said, "Just give your DOB. It's not that deep." But it is deep to me. In my culture, we don't throw personal information around casually. Names, birthdays, family details, those things carry weight. I don't even fully believe all the old traditions, but they shaped how I feel. You don't just erase that because someone else thinks it's silly. What hurts the most is not even Carol. It's Mark. He has known me for 10 years. He has seen me struggle with being between two worlds. He has seen me try to balance respect for where I come from with living here. And now he's acting like I'm just being difficult. We argued again last night. I said, "Why is this more important to you than how I feel?" He said, "Because it's embarrassing to tell my mom you won't give a simple birthday." I said, "So my comfort matters less than your embarrassment?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I just think you're being dramatic." That word again, dramatic. Like, my feelings are a performance. I told him, "This isn't about a date. It's about you listening to me." He said, "I am listening. I just don't agree." I said, "You don't have to agree. You just have to respect it." He said, "Respect goes both ways." And now I'm stuck in my head, wondering if I really am overreacting. Part of me thinks, it's just a year. What harm could it really do? Another part of me feels like if I give in on this, I'm teaching him that my boundaries only matter when he personally understands them. I've already given up so much without even noticing. The way I celebrate holidays, the way I talk to elders, the food I eat most days. I didn't mind those changes because they felt natural over time. But this feels like being pushed. I don't want to fight with his mom. I don't want to be the difficult girlfriend. I just want to feel like the man I've been with for 10 years actually has my back, even when he doesn't get it. Last night he said, "You're turning this into a bigger cultural thing than it needs to be." But it is a cultural thing. And it's also a respect thing. I love him. I really do. But I'm scared of what this means long term. If we can't handle something this small without him brushing me off, what happens with bigger things? Marriage, kids, how we raise them, what traditions matter. I keep asking myself, am I really asking for too much by saying no to one detail about myself? Or am I just finally noticing that sometimes he only respects things that make sense to him? I don't know if this is about a birthday anymore. I think it's about whether I'm allowed to have parts of myself that don't fit neatly into his world. I haven't given Carol my year. Mark is still annoyed. The house feels tense over one number, and I'm sitting here wondering if I should just give in to keep the peace, or if keeping the peace by hurting myself a little at a time is how you slowly lose who you are. Update. After 10 years together, my boyfriend says I should just give my DOB to his mom, but in my culture, that has bigger implications. Am I overreacting? Things did not calm down after I wrote all of that. If anything, the silence got louder. Mark stopped bringing up the birthday directly, but he became distant. He was shorter with me, spent more time on his phone, and stopped doing little things he normally does, like making coffee for both of us in the morning. It felt like he was punishing me without saying he was punishing me. One night I finally said, "Are you mad at me?" He sighed and said, "I'm just tired of fighting about something so stupid." That word again. Stupid. I told him, "It's only stupid because it's not your boundary." He said, "It's exhausting having to tiptoe around things that don't make sense to me." That hurt. I said, "So you only care about my feelings when they make sense to you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I care, but I also think you make things harder than they need to be." I asked him, if this was something important to you, even if I didn't get it, would you want me to respect it? He said, "That's different." I said, "It's not different. It just feels different to you." That turned into another long night where we talked in circles and went to bed angry. A few days later, Carol showed up at our house unannounced. That alone stressed me out, because in my culture you don't just show up, but I didn't say anything. She hugged me and acted normal, but I could feel the tension. While Mark was in the garage, she said quietly, "I hope I didn't offend you about the birthday thing." I said, "You didn't offend me. I just have a boundary about it," she said. "I don't really understand it, but Mark said it's important to you." That surprised me. Maybe he had explained it better after all. She then said, "But you know, when you're part of a family, people like to know these things." That felt like pressure wrapped in a smile. I said, "I understand, but being part of a family also means respecting each other," she nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully agree. After she left, Mark asked me what we talked about. I told him. He got quiet and said, "She feels like you're keeping her at a distance." I said, "I'm not. I just don't want to give one piece of information." He said, "To her, that one piece means more." I said, "And to me, it also means more." That's when something in me shifted. I realized we weren't arguing about a date. We were arguing about whose feelings mattered more. A week later, I had a call with my mom. I told her what was happening. She said, "You are not wrong for protecting what feels important to you, but you also have to decide what kind of life you want." That stuck with me. That night, I told Mark we needed to talk seriously, not a fight, a real talk. I said, "I need to know if you can respect parts of me you don't understand." He said, "I feel like you don't respect my family." I said, "I do. But respect doesn't mean doing everything they want." He said, "It feels like you're choosing old beliefs over us." I said, "I'm choosing myself. I can be with you and still be myself." He looked tired. He said, "I don't know how to live in a relationship where I have to constantly worry about crossing invisible lines." I said, "I don't know how to live in one where my lines don't matter." We sat there for a long time. Then he said something that scared me. He said, "Maybe we just see the world too differently." 10 years. 10 years together, and suddenly that was on the table. I asked him, "Do you really want to throw this away over my birthday?" He said, "It's not the birthday. It's everything it represents." I said, "To me, it represents whether you see me as equal." He didn't answer. The next day, he gave me space. Too much space. He slept on the couch. He didn't text me at work. It felt like we were already breaking up without saying the words. I thought about all the times I'd bent for him, moving cities for his job, changing how I celebrate holidays, eating foods I didn't grow up with every day. None of that felt like a sacrifice at the time. It felt like love. But now I wondered how much of me I had slowly folded away. Finally, I made a decision. Not about the birthday, about me. I told Mark, I'm not giving my year, and I need you to decide if you can live with that, he said. So you're giving me an ultimatum. I said no. I'm telling you who I am. He went quiet. Then he said, I don't want to lose you. I said, I don't want to lose myself. That was the first time he really looked scared. He asked for time. I gave it to him. We're in this weird pause now. Not broken up, not okay. Carol hasn't asked again. I don't know what Mark told her. I don't know what he's thinking. What I do know is that for the first time in 10 years, I'm seeing our relationship clearly. Love isn't just about staying. It's about being seen. Update. After 10 years together, my boyfriend says I should just give my DOB to his mom. But in my culture, that has bigger implications. Am I overreacting? Mark took about 2 weeks to think, but those 2 weeks felt like 2 months. We barely spoke unless it was about bills, the dog, or groceries. Everything else felt dangerous, like one wrong sentence would break something for good. One night, he finally said, Can we talk now? We sat at the kitchen table, the same place we had laughed and planned and eaten 1,000 meals. He looked tired. I probably did too. He said, I've been thinking about what you said. About respect. About not erasing yourself. I didn't interrupt him. He said, I talked to my sister, Emily. She told me I was being stubborn and that just because something doesn't make sense to me doesn't mean it isn't real to you. Hearing that someone else had said it, it made my throat tight. He said, I don't want to be the kind of guy who only respects what he understands. I said then, don't be. He took a deep breath and said, I still don't get why the year matters. But I get that it matters to you, and I should have stopped there. I asked him, so what now? He said, I told my mom she's getting your month and day, not your year. And that's not up for debate. I felt something in my chest loosen that I didn't realize had been clenched for weeks. I said, how did she take it? He said, she wasn't happy. She said she felt shut out. But I told her this isn't about her. It's about you feeling safe. That was the first time he had ever used that word for me. Safe. Things weren't suddenly perfect after that. Trust doesn't snap back into place. But the air in the house changed. He started making coffee again. He started asking how my day was and actually listening. A few days later, Carol sent me a text. She said, Mark explained things better. I still don't fully understand, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I hope you know you're important to us. It wasn't warm and fuzzy, but it was real enough. I replied, thank you for understanding, even if you don't agree. That means a lot to me. We haven't talked much since then, but it doesn't feel hostile anymore. Mark and I also started talking about the bigger stuff, not just birthdays, about how we make decisions, about how we handle differences, about what happens if we have kids one day and they grow up between two cultures like I did. He admitted he had always assumed his way would be the default. He said, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I told him, that's the problem. When one way is always the default, the other slowly disappears. He listened. Really listened. We're not suddenly experts at this. We still mess up. He still sometimes says things that make me feel small without meaning to. I still sometimes shut down instead of speaking up. But now, when it happens, we talk about it instead of pretending it didn't. A few weeks ago, we went to visit his family. Carol showed me the memory book. Next to my name, she had my month and day, and the year space was just blank. She didn't make a joke about it. She didn't point it out. She just showed me the book like it was normal. That blank space felt like respect. On the drive home, Mark said, I'm sorry it took me so long to choose you out loud. I said, I don't need you to choose me over your family. I need you to choose me with your family. He nodded. He said, I'm trying to learn how. I don't know what the next 10 years will look like. But I know this moment changed something important. Not because of a birthday, but because we finally learned how to hear each other. Stories number 9. I ignored a message from an old friend because I was pregnant and exhausted. They passed away 2 days later. I have been carrying this guilt around for months, and it feels heavier every day, so I am putting it here because I do not know where else to put it. I am a 31-year-old woman living in Pennsylvania, and I am currently 8 months pregnant with my first child. This pregnancy has been harder than I ever expected. I was sick constantly during the first trimester, and by the third trimester, I was so exhausted that some days just taking a shower felt like an accomplishment. I work full-time in an office job, and by the time I got home, I barely had the energy to eat, let alone socialize. About 3 months ago, I received a message on Facebook from an old friend named Daniel. Daniel and I grew up in the same small town in New Jersey. We were not childhood best friends, but we were close during high school and for a few years after. We drifted apart naturally like a lot of people do. No big fight, no drama, just different paths. We would occasionally like each other's posts or send a quick happy birthday message, but that was it. His message was simple. He said, "Hey, I know it has been a long time, but I saw your post about the baby and wanted to say congrats." He also said he had been thinking about reaching out for a while and hoped I was doing well. That was it. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming. I saw the message late at night when I was already in bed. My feet were swollen, my back hurt, and I had been up since 5 in the morning. I remember thinking I will respond tomorrow when I have more energy. I did not feel emotionally prepared to reopen an old friendship, and I honestly just wanted to sleep. Tomorrow came, and I forgot. Then the next day, I saw the message again while I was at work and thought I will reply when I get home. When I got home, I threw up after dinner and fell asleep on the couch. Days went by. I noticed the unread message a few times, and every time I felt a little twinge of guilt, but also this heavy exhaustion that made even small tasks feel overwhelming. 2 days after I first saw the message, I woke up to several notifications. One was from a mutual acquaintance named Lauren, who I had not spoken to in years. Her message said, "I do not know if you heard, but Daniel passed away yesterday." I read it 3 times before it made sense. Daniel was 32. He died in a car accident on his way home from work. It was sudden and completely unexpected. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, and then I started crying so hard I could not breathe. All I could think about was that unopened message, that he had reached out and I had ignored him. I spiraled immediately. I kept thinking, what if he needed something? What if he was lonely? What if that message meant more to him than it did to me? I know rationally that his message did not say any of that, but grief does not care about logic. I told my husband Michael what happened, and he tried to comfort me. He said I could not have known and that people ignore messages all the time. He said Daniel probably did not think twice about it, but I cannot stop thinking about how it might have felt from Daniel's side, how vulnerable it can feel to reach out to someone after years of silence. I went back and read our old messages from years ago. There were jokes and shared memories and casual conversations that just stopped one day. I wondered if he had ever thought I did not care. I wondered if my silence confirmed that fear in his final days. I attended his funeral even though it was emotionally and physically hard for me. I stood in the back because I did not know his family well. I saw his parents, his sister Megan, and a lot of people from our hometown. Everyone talked about how kind he was and how he always checked in on people. That made the guilt worse. After the service, Megan approached me. She recognized me and said Daniel had mentioned my name recently. She said he was happy for me about the baby. She thanked me for coming. I wanted to tell her about the message. I wanted to apologize for not responding. I did not. I did not know if that would help anyone or just make things worse. Since then, I have been haunted by that unread message. I did eventually open it. I stared at it for a long time before replying, even though I knew he would never see it. I wrote everything I wished I had said. I told him I was sorry and that I hoped he knew I cared. Then I felt ridiculous for doing that, but also slightly relieved. I am struggling with how to forgive myself. I know I did not do anything intentionally wrong. I know I was exhausted and overwhelmed and pregnant. But I also know that sometimes small moments matter more than we realize. I am afraid this guilt will always be attached to his memory. I do not want to remember Daniel only as the friend I failed to reply to. I want to remember the good parts. But right now, the last thing I have from him is a message I ignored. Final update. I ignored a message from an old friend because I was pregnant and exhausted. They passed away 2 days later. It has been several months since I first wrote this, and I needed time before I could come back to it because everything after that post felt intertwined with grief, hormones, and a life change that does not pause for sadness. I gave birth to my son in early winter. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments where I was terrified, but when they finally placed him on my chest, the world narrowed down to his tiny weight and his uneven breaths. For a short while, everything else went quiet, including the guilt. That silence did not last, but I am grateful for it. The weeks after giving birth were a blur of sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and learning how to be a mother. Exhaustion took on a new meaning. In the middle of those nights, when I was rocking my son, I found myself thinking about Daniel again. I kept thinking about time and how quickly it moves, and how easily moments slip by unnoticed. One night, while scrolling mindlessly during a feeding, I saw a post from Megan. She had shared a photo of Daniel from when they were kids and wrote about how strange it felt to keep living when someone you love does not get to. Something about that cracked something open in me. I realized I had been carrying this guilt in isolation, and maybe it was time to let some of it breathe. The next morning, I sent Megan a message. I did not dump everything on her. I did not make it about me. I simply told her that Daniel had reached out to me shortly before he passed, and that I had not responded in time, and that I was so sorry. I told her I had been pregnant and exhausted, but that was not an excuse, just context. I told her I hoped she knew he mattered to me. I was terrified of her response. When she replied hours later, my hands were shaking. She thanked me for telling her. She said Daniel had been trying to reconnect with people from his past, and that it made him happy even if the conversations did not always go anywhere. She said he never mentioned feeling rejected by anyone, and that he understood life gets busy. She told me to be gentle with myself. I cried harder reading that than I had in a long time. Not because all the guilt disappeared, but because for the first time I felt like maybe I was not the villain my mind had turned me into. I have also talked about this in therapy, which I started a few weeks after giving birth. My therapist helped me understand something important. She said grief often latches onto a single moment because it gives our pain somewhere to sit. If it was not the message, it would have been something else. A missed call, a forgotten birthday, a goodbye that felt too short. She said that does not mean the guilt is valid, it just means the loss hurts. I still think about Daniel. I think about him when my son smiles in his sleep and when I drive past places from my hometown. I no longer imagine that unread message as a failure, but as proof that he thought of me kindly. That matters. I have learned that we cannot respond to every moment perfectly. We are human and tired and overwhelmed, and sometimes surviving is all we can do. I have also learned to respond sooner when I can, and to tell people I care about them, even if it feels awkward or out of the blue. The guilt has softened. It still shows up sometimes, usually late at night, when the house is quiet. But it no longer feels like punishment. It feels like grief mixed with love and regret mixed with growth. If anyone reading this is carrying something similar, I hope you know that one missed message does not define a relationship, and it does not erase the care that existed. We all do the best we can with the energy we have in the moment. Stories number 10. My roommate says I disrespected her faith by letting my boyfriend stay over. I am writing this because I genuinely do not know if I crossed a line or if this situation spiraled into something unreasonable and I need outside perspective. I am a 27-year-old woman living in Colorado, and until recently, I thought my living situation was normal, if not a little awkward, in the way most shared apartments are. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate Hannah. We met through a mutual friend and moved in together a little over a year ago. When we first talked about living together, we went over the basics like rent, utilities, cleaning schedules, and guests. Nothing about religion ever came up. Hannah mentioned she was religious in a general sense, but I did not ask follow-up questions, and she did not elaborate. I am not religious, and I do not have an issue with people who are as long as we respect each other. For the most part, living together was fine. Hannah is quiet. She works early mornings at a medical billing office and goes to bed early. I work in marketing, and my schedule is more flexible. We are not best friends, but we are friendly. We share groceries sometimes and watch TV together occasionally. We have never had a major argument until now. I have been dating my boyfriend Daniel for about 8 months. He lives about 40 minutes away, and usually we hang out at his place because it is easier. Hannah knew I was seeing someone. She met Daniel once briefly when he helped me carry in a bookshelf. There was no issue then. About 3 weeks ago, Daniel's apartment had a plumbing problem and his landlord needed him out for a couple of nights. He asked if he could stay with me. I hesitated only because I did not want to inconvenience Hannah, but I did not think it would be a problem. Our lease does not prohibit overnight guests as long as they are not essentially moving in. I texted Hannah and said, "Hey, just a heads up, Daniel might stay over for 2 nights because of a plumbing issue." She replied, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." Daniel came over on a Friday night. We ordered food, watched a movie, and went to bed. We stayed in my room. We were quiet. On Saturday, we were out most of the day. Sunday morning, Hannah asked if we could talk. Her tone was serious, and it caught me off guard. She told me that she felt uncomfortable with Daniel staying over. I apologized immediately and asked if he had done something to make her uncomfortable. She said no, it was not about him personally. She said having an unmarried man staying overnight violated her religious beliefs. She explained that her faith does not allow cohabitation with unmarried couples and that she felt distressed knowing we were sleeping together in the apartment. I honestly did not know what to say at first. I told her I was sorry she felt uncomfortable, but that I did not know this was an issue. She said she assumed it was understood. I asked how I was supposed to know something that had never been communicated. She said it should be common courtesy. Things escalated quickly from there. She said she felt disrespected in her own home. I said I felt blindsided. She said my actions were sinful. I said that was not fair to put on me when I do not share her beliefs. She then asked me to promise that Daniel would never stay overnight again. I told her I was not comfortable making that promise. I said I would be mindful and limit overnight stays, but I could not agree to a total ban based on her religion. That made her very upset. She told me that her religion is not just a preference, but a core part of who she is, and that by allowing Daniel to stay, I was forcing her to live in sin. That phrase stuck with me because it felt extreme. I told her that I respect her faith, but I also have a right to live my life within the terms of our lease. She accused me of choosing my boyfriend over her well-being. I told her that was not what I was doing. I said I was choosing balance and fairness. I reminded her that she never told me this was an issue before. She said she did not think she had to spell it out. After that conversation, things became tense. She barely spoke to me for days. Daniel felt awful and offered to never stay over again to keep the peace. I told him that while I appreciated that I did not want to set a precedent where my personal life is dictated by someone else's beliefs. A week later, Hannah sent me a long text while I was at work. She said she had prayed about it and felt convicted that she could not continue living in a space where this kind of behavior was happening. She said unless I agreed to no overnight male guests, she would consider this an ongoing violation of her faith. I responded calmly and told her again that I was sorry she was struggling, but that I could not agree to that. I suggested we look into compromise like advance notice, limiting frequency, or using white noise and boundaries. She said compromise was not possible when it came to sin. At that point, I started to feel angry. I felt like she was reframing a roommate disagreement into a moral judgment of me as a person. I never mocked her beliefs. I never interfered with her practices. I simply lived my life quietly in my own room. I spoke to our mutual friend Lauren, who had originally introduced us. Lauren was surprised because Hannah had never mentioned such strict beliefs before. Lauren said she understood Hannah feeling uncomfortable, but thought it was unfair to expect total compliance without prior agreement. I also checked our lease again and even spoke briefly with the property manager Eric to clarify guest policies without naming names. He confirmed that occasional overnight guests are allowed and that religious objections are not enforceable lease terms. When I told Hannah that legally I was within my rights, she accused me of threatening her and said I was bringing law into something spiritual. That was not my intention. I just wanted her to understand that I was not secretly doing something wrong. Now the apartment feels heavy. She avoids shared spaces. She plays religious music loudly in the mornings. I stay in my room more than I should. Daniel has stayed over once since then with my explicit notice, and Hannah barely acknowledged my existence for days afterward. I keep replaying everything, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have asked more questions before moving in. Maybe I should have apologized more. Maybe I should have stood firmer earlier. At the same time, I cannot shake the feeling that I am being asked to give up normal adult autonomy in my own home because of beliefs I do not share and was never told about. I am not hosting parties. I am not being loud. I am not asking her to participate in anything. I am just existing. I do not want to villainize her faith. I know religion is deeply personal and meaningful, but I also feel like respect has to go both ways. I did not sign a religious agreement when I signed the lease. I signed a legal one. Now I am debating whether to ride out the rest of the lease in awkward silence or start looking for a new place. I hate the idea of moving because of this. It feels unfair. But I also do not know how to live long-term in a space where my roommate believes my private relationship makes her morally compromised. I am exhausted from overthinking this. I keep asking myself if I am wrong for not giving in completely, if respecting someone means limiting yourself to the point of resentment, or if this is one of those situations where compatibility matters more than intentions. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted my boyfriend to have a place to sleep for a couple of nights. Now it feels like I accidentally stepped into a much bigger conflict about boundaries, belief, and control, and I do not know what the right move is anymore. Update. My roommate says I disrespected her faith by letting my boyfriend stay over. A lot has changed since I first wrote this, and some of it happened faster than I expected, while other parts dragged on in a way that felt emotionally exhausting. I want to be honest about how things unfolded because the situation did not resolve with one big dramatic moment, but with a series of uncomfortable realizations that slowly forced a decision. After the tension settled into an uneasy routine, Hannah and I stopped pretending things were normal. We barely spoke except for practical matters like bills. The apartment no longer felt like a shared home. It felt like neutral territory where every movement was monitored, even if nothing was said out loud. One night, about 2 weeks after my original post, Hannah knocked on my door. I opened it, expecting another argument, but she looked calmer than she had in a while. She told me she wanted to talk, and that she had been discussing the situation with her pastor. That immediately put me on edge, but I stayed open. She said her pastor told her that while she could not control my actions, she had a responsibility to remove herself from environments that caused her spiritual distress. She said she felt she had tried to communicate her needs and that I had chosen not to honor them. She asked if I would reconsider my stance one last time because otherwise she would have to make changes for her own faith. I told her gently but clearly that my answer had not changed. I said I respected her beliefs, but I could not agree to a rule that governed my private life when it had never been part of our agreement. I reminded her again that I had already tried to compromise. She nodded, but I could see she was disappointed. A few days later, she sent me another message saying she intended to move out at the end of the month. She framed it as a decision guided by prayer and not anger. She also said she expected me to cover the full rent if she left early. That part immediately concerned me. I reviewed the lease again and confirmed that we were both jointly responsible for rent until the lease ended unless the landlord approved a replacement tenant. I contacted the property manager, Eric, and explained the situation in neutral terms. He said if Hannah wanted to leave, she would need to find someone to take over her portion or continue paying until the lease expired. When I told Hannah this, she became very upset. She accused me of trapping her in a sinful environment using legal technicalities. That hurt because I had never tried to force her to stay. I simply did not want to be financially punished for a boundary I did not create. Things escalated when she stopped paying her share of utilities while still living there. I documented everything and sent her written reminders. She told me she was fasting and limiting expenses for spiritual reasons and that God would provide. That was when I realized this was no longer just a values conflict, but a practical problem that could seriously affect me. Daniel became more involved at this point, not by staying over, but by supporting me emotionally. He encouraged me to protect myself and not let guilt override common sense. I also spoke again with Lauren, who said Hannah had been posting vague things online about persecution and moral decay. Seeing that made me feel both sad and relieved because it confirmed I was not imagining the hostility. Eventually, Hannah found a room with someone from her church and told me she would be moving out in 10 days. She asked if I would release her from the lease. I said I would if the landlord approved a sublet. Eric agreed after meeting the new tenant whose name is Rebecca. We all signed the paperwork and Hannah moved out at the end of that week. The day she left was quiet and strange. She hugged me and said she hoped I would find truth someday. I told her I hoped she found peace. It was one of those moments that feels polite on the surface but heavy underneath. Since then, the apartment has felt lighter. Rebecca moved in and is respectful, easygoing, and clear about boundaries. She has her own beliefs but does not expect them to shape my life. That difference alone has been eye-opening. I have spent a lot of time reflecting on what I could have done differently. I think earlier communication on both sides might have prevented some of the pain. At the same time, I am learning that not all conflicts can be solved with compromise, especially when one side frames disagreement as moral failure. I do not feel angry anymore. Mostly, I feel resolved. This experience forced me to define my boundaries more clearly and to understand that respecting someone does not mean erasing yourself. I also learned that compatibility matters deeply when sharing a home and that assumptions on either side can grow into resentment if left unspoken. Daniel stayed over again recently without any drama or anxiety attached to it. That alone felt like a quiet victory. Not because I won anything, but because my home feels like my home again. I hope Hannah finds a living situation that aligns fully with her faith. I also hope she learns that coexistence requires communication, not expectation. As for me, I am moving forward with a clearer sense of what I need and what I am willing to accept. I did not expect a simple overnight visit to turn into a life lesson about autonomy, belief, and boundaries. But here we are. And while it was uncomfortable, I think I came out of it more grounded than before. Update 2. My roommate says I disrespected her faith by letting my boyfriend stay over. I did not think I would need to write again, but some unexpected things happened after Hannah moved out, and I feel like the situation had one last emotional ripple that I did not anticipate. This is less about conflict now and more about processing what lingered after everything technically ended. Living with Rebecca has been calm in a way that still feels unfamiliar. The apartment is quiet without feeling tense. We talk like normal roommates. We ask before borrowing things. We laugh sometimes. That contrast alone has made me realize just how much stress I had normalized before. I did not understand how guarded I had become until I was not anymore. About 3 weeks after Hannah moved out, I got an email from her. It was long and very carefully worded. She said she had been reflecting and felt led to reach out one last time. She apologized for withholding utility payments and said she recognized that was wrong. She sent the money she owed. That part genuinely surprised me. The rest of the email was harder to read. She said she still believed her stance was morally correct, but acknowledged that she expected me to intuit boundaries that were never clearly communicated. She said she had always lived in environments where people shared her values and assumed that was the default. Living with me challenged that assumption in ways she was not prepared for. She also admitted that seeing me stand firm without being cruel forced her to confront how she handles disagreement. She said she often equates discomfort with persecution, and that this situation made her question that pattern. That sentence stuck with me more than anything else she wrote. I replied briefly. I thanked her for sending the money and for taking accountability. I told her I hoped she found peace and stability. I did not reopen the debate. I did not apologize again. That felt like growth for me. Around the same time, Lauren told me Hannah had left their church group temporarily and was attending counseling through a faith-based service. I do not know if that is true, but if it is, I genuinely hope it helps her. I no longer feel responsible for her emotional journey, but I also do not wish her harm. Daniel and I also had some important conversations because this situation affected our relationship more than I realized. He admitted that watching me navigate everything made him question how conflict-averse he is. He said he admired that I held my ground without escalating. Hearing that made me realize I had been so focused on keeping the peace that I forgot to acknowledge my own strength. We talked about future living situations and expectations, about how easy it is to fall into assumptions when things are good. This whole experience has made me more intentional about asking uncomfortable questions early instead of assuming compatibility will sort itself out. One small but meaningful moment happened last weekend. Rebecca invited a few friends over for dinner and asked if it was okay if one of them stayed late. The fact that she asked and that the question felt normal instead of loaded made me laugh after she went to bed. That is how it should feel. Consideration without control. I have stopped replaying the initial argument in my head. For a while, it haunted me because I kept wondering if I had failed some unspoken social test. Now I see that the test itself was flawed. Mutual respect cannot exist if only one person is expected to bend. If anything, this situation taught me that boundaries are not acts of aggression. They are acts of clarity. They allow people to coexist honestly instead of quietly resenting each other. I also learned that religious freedom goes both ways. It protects belief, but it does not obligate others to live by it. I do not regret letting Daniel stay over. I regret how much doubt I carried afterward. I regret shrinking myself emotionally to keep someone else comfortable. That is something I am actively working on not repeating. Life feels steady now. Not dramatic. Not heavy. Just steady. Sometimes the resolution is not about who was right or wrong, but about recognizing when a situation has taught you everything it can and it is time to move forward without carrying the weight of it anymore. Final update. My roommate says I disrespected her faith by letting my boyfriend stay over. I did not plan to write again, but something happened that felt like a real ending instead of just things fading out. And I wanted to put it into words for myself as much as for anyone reading. This will probably be the last time I talk about this situation because it finally feels settled in a way I did not expect months ago. A few weeks after Hannah's email, and after life had mostly returned to normal, I ran into her by accident. I was at a grocery store near my apartment on a Sunday afternoon, and I turned down an aisle, and there she was, standing a few feet away, holding a basket. For a split second, we just looked at each other. I felt that old knot of anxiety in my chest, but it did not take over the way it used to. She was the one who spoke first. She said my name quietly and asked how I was doing. I told her I was doing well and asked the same. We talked right there, between shelves of canned food, for maybe 5 minutes. It was awkward, but not hostile. She told me she had moved fully into her new place and that it felt more aligned for her. I told her I was glad she found somewhere that felt right. At one point, she said something that surprised me. She said she realized, after moving out, that she had been trying to manage her fear by controlling her environment and the people in it. She said it was easier to label something as sinful than to admit it scared her. I did not know what to say to that, except thank you for telling me. We were not suddenly friends again, and it did not erase what happened, but it felt honest. Before we parted, she apologized again for how she handled things, especially the financial part. I accepted the apology without adding anything else. We wished each other well and went our separate ways. I sat in my car afterward for a minute, just breathing. I did not feel victorious or validated. I felt lighter. Since then, life has been very ordinary in the best possible way. Rebecca and I renewed the lease together. We communicate clearly. We respect each other's space. That sounds boring, but after everything that happened, it feels like peace. Daniel and I are still together and doing well. We recently talked about moving in together next year when my lease ends. That conversation felt exciting instead of stressful. I think that alone says a lot about how much this whole experience changed me. I am more aware now of what shared space really means and what questions need to be asked before expectations harden into resentment. Looking back, I can see how easy it is for situations like this to turn into something bigger than they need to be when values clash and no one wants to blink first. I also see now that compromise only works when both sides believe the other deserves autonomy. When one person believes their moral framework should override everything else, there is no middle ground, no matter how polite the conversation starts. I do not hate Hannah. I do not think she is a bad person. I think she was unprepared for difference, and I was unprepared for how deeply someone else's fear could spill into my life. We both learned something, even if it came at a cost. If there's one thing I am taking forward, it is this. Respect does not mean preemptive self-sacrifice. It means honesty early and boundaries held calmly. You can be kind without shrinking. You can disagree without attacking. And sometimes the healthiest outcome is simply no longer sharing the same space. My home feels like mine again. That is something I will never take lightly. Stories number 11. The moment it all clicked about my perfect best friend. I used to joke that my dating life was cursed. Every time I met someone I actually liked, something strange happened. A misunderstanding, a rumor, an awkward coincidence that made me look flaky, dishonest, or unstable. For 3 years straight, every promising relationship collapsed right when it started to feel real. I blamed bad luck, timing, even myself. I never blamed the one person who was always there comforting me afterward. My best friend Natalie and I met our first year of college in Ohio. She was the kind of person everyone instantly trusted. Blonde, polished, soft voice, always knew the right thing to say. Professors loved her. My parents adored her. Guys I dated always said some version of, "You're lucky to have a friend like Natalie." I believed them. She helped me move apartments twice. She remembered birthdays. She held my hair when I was sick. She was, by all outside measures, perfect. So when my dating life kept imploding, Natalie was the one sitting on my couch with wine, telling me I deserved better. The first guy was Evan. We met through coworkers at a 4th of July party. He was funny, a little awkward, and very sincere. We dated for about 6 weeks. One night, he showed up to my place acting distant. Eventually, he asked me why I was still talking to my ex and telling people I missed him. I laughed because I hadn't talked to my ex in over a year. Evan pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots, messages from an Instagram account with my name and photos I recognized. The tone sounded like me. I was shocked and embarrassed and immediately defensive. I told him it wasn't me. He said he didn't want drama and left. I spent days spiraling. Natalie helped me report the fake account and told me Evan clearly wasn't mature enough to communicate. The second was Marcus. We met on Hinge and clicked instantly. Same taste in music. Same sarcasm. We went on 3 great dates and slept together on the 4th. A week later, he ghosted me. Completely disappeared. Months later, I ran into him at a bar with mutual friends. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me. Drunk enough to be honest, he asked why I'd warned him that I had serious trust issues and would freak out if he talked to other women. I stared at him like he was speaking another language. He said Natalie told him. Apparently, she'd just been looking out for him. I confronted Natalie that time. Gently. Carefully. I asked why she would say that. She looked hurt and confused and said she'd only told him I'd been hurt badly before and sometimes needed reassurance. She cried. I apologized for accusing her. There were others. Tyler, who suddenly decided he wasn't ready for anything after someone told him I was already planning our future. Ben, who accused me of lying about my job after hearing I'd exaggerated my salary. Andrew, who claimed I'd said I hated his sister. Each time, the source was always vague. A friend, someone who cared, someone who just wanted to be honest with them. And every time, Natalie was right there telling me those men were insecure, intimidated, or emotionally unavailable. I started to believe something was wrong with me. I read self-help books. I went to therapy. I replayed conversations in my head. Natalie reassured me constantly that I was doing everything right. The realization didn't come from a big dramatic reveal. It came from something small and stupid. Last summer, I started seeing Daniel. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in Chicago. He was calm, thoughtful, and very private. We agreed to take things slow. I didn't even tell Natalie about him at first. For once, I wanted something that felt untouched. A month in, things were good. Really good. No drama, no weirdness. When I finally mentioned Daniel to Natalie, she seemed excited, but immediately curious in a way that made my stomach tighten. She asked his last name, where he worked, if he had social media. I brushed it off. 2 weeks later, Daniel asked if we could talk. That familiar dread washed over me. He said someone had reached out to him on Facebook claiming to be a concerned friend. They said I had a pattern of getting serious fast and then accusing men of emotional abuse when things didn't go my way. They said I had a history of blowing up lives. The wording was chilling. It sounded rehearsed. For the first time, instead of panicking, I asked to see the message. The account was private, new, no photos, but the phrasing felt familiar. It sounded exactly like the way Natalie talked when she was protecting someone. I didn't tell Natalie about the message. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I paid attention. I noticed how she always asked for details about the men I dated, but never wanted to meet them. How she'd find subtle flaws early and frame them as concern. How she'd say things like, I just worry they won't treat you right before anything even happened. How she seemed energized after a breakup and deflated when things went well. The final confirmation came when I made up a lie. I told Natalie I'd started seeing a guy named Lucas. I described him in detail. His job, his personality, his dog. I even showed her a fake Instagram I created with stock photos. I acted excited, nervous, hopeful. 3 days later, the fake Instagram account got a message, a long one, warning Lucas about me, listing my supposed red flags, things only Natalie knew, childhood stories, insecurities I'd cried to her about at 2 a.m. The account wasn't anonymous this time. It was her real profile. Seeing it felt like the floor giving out under me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. I read it over and over, hoping I was wrong, hoping there was another explanation. There wasn't. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Not really. She said she was protecting me. She said every man I dated wasn't good enough. She said I changed when I was in relationships, and she felt abandoned. She said she couldn't stand the idea of someone else becoming more important than her. She cried and said she never meant for it to go so far. 3 years. 3 years of manipulation, of impersonation, of lying to my face while watching me fall apart. of reassuring me while actively sabotaging my happiness. I walked out of her apartment and blocked her everywhere. I told Daniel everything. He believed me. We're still together, cautiously rebuilding trust in a world that suddenly feels a lot less safe. I don't know what hurts more. Losing the relationship she destroyed, or realizing the person I trusted most was the one pulling the strings the entire time. I keep thinking about all those nights she held me while I cried over men who suddenly turned cold. How convincing she was. How kind she seemed. How easily I believed that the problem had to be me. If you're reading this and something feels off in your life, pay attention. Sometimes the villain isn't obvious. Sometimes they're sitting right next to you, telling you they love you, while quietly making sure you never leave. Update: the moment it all clicked about my perfect best friend. I didn't plan on writing an update this soon, but so much has happened that my head feels like it's buzzing all the time, and I need to get it out somewhere. After I cut Natalie off, I thought the hardest part would be grieving the friendship. I was wrong. The hardest part has been realizing how deep the damage actually goes and how many parts of my life she had her hands in without me knowing. The first few days after I blocked her were surreal. My phone was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. No good morning texts, no check-ins, no memes sent to distract me. At first it felt peaceful, and then it felt terrifying. I kept reaching for my phone to tell her something, and then remembering I couldn't. I started questioning myself again. I wondered if I'd overreacted. I wondered if I'd misunderstood her intentions. Years of her voice in my head didn't disappear overnight. Daniel stayed calm through all of this. He asked questions, but didn't push. He told me he believed me, and that he wanted to move forward slowly and honestly. I appreciated that more than I can explain. At the same time, I could feel how shaken he was. Knowing someone he hadn't even met tried to poison his view of me rattled him. It rattled both of us. About a week later, things escalated. I got an email from an unknown address with no subject line. The body just said, "I'm sorry you feel hurt, but I was only trying to protect people from you." Reading that made my stomach drop. She'd found another way to reach me. I didn't respond. Instead, I saved it. Then another email came. This one longer. This one angrier. She accused me of betraying her, of choosing a man over her, of twisting the story to make her look evil. She said if I told anyone else about what she did, she would defend herself. The wording felt like a threat, even though she never outright said one. That's when I stopped doubting myself. I talked to a lawyer. I never thought I'd type that sentence about my best friend, but here we are. The lawyer told me to document everything. Screenshots, dates, messages, fake accounts. He said what she did could potentially fall under harassment and impersonation, especially since it happened repeatedly over years. Hearing it framed that way made me feel sick, but also validated. This wasn't just messy friendship drama. This was serious. While gathering everything, I went back through old messages between Natalie and me. That was a mistake emotionally, but probably necessary. Patterns jumped out at me that I'd never noticed before. Every time I mentioned a guy being kind or consistent, she'd respond with subtle doubt. Every breakup was followed by her telling me I was better off and that she'd always be there. I realized how isolated I'd slowly become. She was the common thread in every chapter. I also reached out to two men I dated in the past, Evan and Marcus. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Closure, maybe. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Both conversations were uncomfortable, but eye-opening. Evan admitted he'd always felt something was off, but didn't know how to confront it. Marcus apologized for ghosting and said Natalie had seemed so sincere that he didn't question her. Hearing that hurt, but it also helped me stop blaming myself for everything. Natalie tried a different tactic after I didn't respond to her emails. She showed up at my apartment. I wasn't home. Daniel was. He called me immediately, his voice tight, telling me she was outside and wouldn't leave. She was crying loudly enough that neighbors were starting to look. He told her she wasn't welcome and that she needed to leave or he'd call the police. Apparently, she laughed and said I was turning him against her just like I did everyone else. Hearing that secondhand made my hands shake with anger. I drove home, and by the time I got there, she was gone. I filed a police report that night. Nothing dramatic came of it, but it created a record. That alone made me feel safer. Emotionally, I'm still all over the place. Some days I feel strong and clear and proud of myself for finally seeing the truth. Other days I mourn her. Not who she was, but who I thought she was. I miss the version of my life where I believed I had a loyal best friend who loved me unconditionally. Accepting that that version was a lie is brutal. Daniel and I are taking things one step at a time. I've been honest with him about my trust issues and my fear that I'll somehow sabotage things myself now that Natalie isn't doing it for me. He listens. He reassures me without smothering me. It's strange learning what healthy actually feels like instead of dramatic and intense. Therapy has become non-negotiable for me. My therapist gently pointed out that Natalie didn't just sabotage my dating life. She shaped my self-image. She trained me to doubt my instincts and to see myself as fragile and flawed. Undoing that is going to take time. The biggest change has been silence. Without her constant presence, I've had to sit with my own thoughts. I've had to decide what I want without someone steering me. It's scary, but also freeing. I don't know what Natalie will do next. Part of me still worries about retaliation or more lies. But I'm done hiding. I've told close friends the truth. I've protected myself legally. And most importantly, I finally trust myself again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes wrapped in love, concern, and familiarity. Sometimes the person who tells you they're protecting you is really just protecting their place in your life. Update. The moment it all clicked about my perfect best friend. I waited a long time before writing this because I needed to be sure it was actually over. Not emotionally, I don't think that part ever fully ends, but in a real, tangible way where I could finally breathe without looking over my shoulder. I can say now that things have settled enough for me to tell the rest of it without my hands shaking the entire time. After I filed the police report, Natalie went quiet for a while. No emails. No fake accounts that I could trace back to her. No surprise appearances. That silence was almost worse than the chaos, because my body stayed in a constant state of alert. Every notification made my heart jump. Every unfamiliar car outside my building made me nervous. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the threat pauses. About a month later, I found out she'd been telling her version of the story. A mutual friend, Claire, called me one night, sounding hesitant. She said Natalie had been reaching out to people from our old friend group, crying and saying I'd had a breakdown and was falsely accusing her because I was obsessed with a guy. According to Natalie, I'd invented the fake accounts, framed her, and cut her off when she tried to get me help. Hearing that made me feel cold all over. It was like watching her try to rewrite reality in real time. This time, though, I was ready. Instead of reacting emotionally, I sent Claire the screenshots, the messages, the timestamps, the email where Natalie outright admitted contacting men behind my back. Claire went quiet for a long moment and then said she was sorry for not seeing it sooner. That conversation happened again and again with different people. Not everyone believed me, and I made peace with that. I learned quickly who actually cared about truth and who just wanted comfort and familiarity. Natalie's story started falling apart when she couldn't control who talked to whom anymore. The legal side moved slowly but steadily. Through my lawyer, Natalie was sent a cease and desist letter. It outlined exactly what she'd done and what would happen if she continued contacting me or interfering in my personal life. She responded once through her own attorney, denying malicious intent but agreeing to stop all contact. Seeing it in formal language felt surreal. This was someone who used to borrow my clothes and cry on my bed about work stress. Now our communication existed only on legal letterhead. That was the moment it finally hit me that the friendship was truly dead. Daniel and I didn't come out of this unscathed, but we're still here. There were hard conversations. There were moments where my fear made me pull away, and moments where he needed reassurance that I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. We chose transparency even when it was uncomfortable. Slowly, trust started to feel less fragile. Not perfect, but real. One night, months after everything blew up, he asked me something that stuck with me. He asked how I didn't see it for so long. I thought about it and realized the answer wasn't stupidity or denial. It was love. I trusted Natalie because she had been there during formative years of my life. She knew my history, my wounds, my worst moments. I assumed that proximity equaled loyalty. I know now that it doesn't. Therapy helped me unpack something even harder to admit. Part of me had relied on Natalie's sabotage without realizing it. As long as my relationships failed mysteriously, I never had to fully risk being vulnerable long term. She fed my fears while pretending to soothe them. That dynamic kept me stuck, and breaking free meant facing adulthood without a safety net that wasn't actually safe. I've rebuilt my life quietly. New routines, stronger boundaries, friends who don't need to be the center of everything. I stopped oversharing. I started listening to my instincts again. When something feels off now, I don't rationalize it away. I heard through the grapevine that Natalie moved to a different state. I don't know if that's true, and I don't plan to check. I don't hate her. That surprised me. What I feel instead is a deep sadness for someone so afraid of being left that she chose control over love. But that sadness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean forgiveness. It just means I'm done carrying anger for someone who no longer has a role in my life. The biggest change is internal. I don't see myself as broken anymore. For years, I thought I was the common denominator in every failed relationship. I thought I was difficult to love. Now I see that someone worked very hard to make sure I never stayed long enough to find out otherwise. If anyone reading this is questioning a friendship that feels too intense, too involved, or strangely invested in your unhappiness, please don't ignore that feeling. Love shouldn't require you to shrink, stall, or stay stuck. Real support doesn't sabotage your growth and then call it protection. I lost my best friend, but I got my life back. And for the first time, in a very long time, the future doesn't feel cursed.